Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Is this thing on? Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1323 of the War News Stream. And we are back yet again with very big news from yesterday and today. We've also seen the Russian stock market is crashing today as inflation is getting terribly bad. We've also seen the Zaporizhzhia nuclear crisis become very critical as of today. And we've also seen U.S. Special Forces deployed near Venezuela. And we have plenty more news than that. It's good to see you all once again.
And of course, folks, after we were so rudely interrupted last night by an unforeseen and unbelievable internet outage, we are now back to be able to cover the past 48 hours of news from around the world. And it has never felt better, folks, to be able to get back on air and right back to form than tonight. And we are going to be making sure to cover the past 48 hours of news that we have from around the entirety of the world, and I've got to be honest with y'all, folks, that is going to be a tall order today, because we have had an insanely large amount of news happen just in the past 24 hours alone. The European Union Parliament has given orders today that any Russian aircraft violating NATO airspace or the airspace of the European Union are to be shot down by any forces that are available within the area. This also comes at the same time as Denmark and Poland are continuously getting training from Ukrainian liaison forces inside of NATO, which are helping to assist them in learning how to detect and shoot down incoming drones launched by the Russian Federation. The United States and NATO at large is conducting unforeseen surveillance operations along the entirety of the NATO frontier today, using multiple different forms of surveillance aircraft to conduct this task. While that's going on, inside of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, we have also been able to hear that inside of that country, airstrikes are now commencing across the entirety of its southern regions, as believe it or not, it's not the United States, it's the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, which is now conducting airstrikes against Afghanistan after a small border war that's been going on for about a month has apparently boiled over in Pakistani central leadership and has led them to conduct full-blown airstrikes inside of major Afghan cities, including the capital of Kabul. Not only that, we have been able to hear that the president of the Russian Federation is apparently in a little bit of a panic today, as the Russian stock market has dived about better than anyone else at the Olympic teams inside the United States, and we're known for diving. Speaking of some diving, we've also been able to hear that the Russian Federation is continuing to dive the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant reactors into a complete lack of water and leading them almost into a full meltdown. We are understanding at this point, according to our last update, that the situation is critical at the power plant and appears to be reaching an even more severe apex within the coming days, as the generators are operating on their last bits of available fuel, and one of the generators within the reactor halls has already failed at this point. Not only that, there has also been major news inside of Venezuela, as the United States of America has been spotted in Trinidad and Tobago with the 160th SOAR conducting Special Operations Forces training exercises just miles away from the Venezuelan coast, actually visible from the Venezuelan shorelines. The Venezuelans are continuing to prepare for an eventual strike by the nation of Venezuela, and it does appear that there are major developments happening around the entirety of the world so far. Not only that, we have also been able to see that it appears that the uneasy ceasefire inside of the Middle East is continuing to progress, at least to some degree, although it does appear, beyond that fact, that this may end up lasting not a long while, or may actually end up lasting for several years. It's a little bit unclear at the moment, but the situation certainly is developing. That can be said at the least. Nevertheless, we are going to be making sure to cover the last 24 hours and 48 hours of all of the breaking news we have from around the entirety of the world, and there is, of course, a load of it to go over the course of the day. So moving us on into our first and most major story of the day, we have been able to hear that inside of the European Union's parliament, there has been a shocking, honestly unbelievable order that has been issued today. According to Visegrad 24, the European Parliament has adopted a resolution calling on European Union member states to shoot down Russian aircraft violating their airspace. The resolution also condemned Russian drone attacks on infrastructure across Europe and is now the first concerted action not by NATO but by the European Union, which is openly stating the obvious Russian drone threat and is also giving an order for the larger part that all European Union members, for their collective security, must engage and shoot down any Russian aircraft, whether they be manned or unmanned, inside of the airspace of the European Union. This is a quite significant development. As many of you all do know, that there has been small efforts made inside of countries that are a part of the European Union and NATO to be able to counter the Russian drone threat, including the Federal Republic of Germany just yesterday moving forward with an amendment that will allow for them to be able to engage the drones. According to the federal government of Germany, they had approved an amendment to the Federal Police Act, which would expand the powers of the federal police, allowing them to intercept drones that are deemed to be a threat to the critical strikes using technical measures that include electromagnetic pulse devices, jamming, GPS interference, as well as physical measures such as directly shooting down the drones, according to the German Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt. That is a fairly significant development in its own right, and it's now being added on to the tectonic news that's coming out of the European Union's parliament, that they now are pretty much giving orders to the whole of the European Union for the safety of the alliance and also for the safety of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that any such Russian incursions will be shot down. We also saw further developments inside of multiple European countries working towards that matter, as inside of Denmark we actually saw air defense training that was being conducted between the Ukrainians and the Danes. This is actually a little bit interesting. Some of y'all may remember years ago, it was actually European countries like Denmark, Germany, Poland, Italy, Spain, and France, along with the United Kingdom, that were bringing Ukrainian soldiers out of Ukraine and to their countries to train them how to fight a modern war in a NATO doctrinal style. 3.5 years later, the Ukrainians are now traveling into Europe, not to learn something from the European armed forces, but to teach the armed forces of Europe how to actually deal with drone forces effectively, pretty much showing that it's a mutualistic sort of relationship at this point, and now, years later, it's come around that the Ukrainians are now teaching us something about war. And in this clip, we actually saw some defense training being conducted with the Ukrainians and the Danes, and we do understand this footage is coming from an undisclosed location somewhere inside of Denmark, but here's the clip.
I can't believe it. The Danes are actually training. You know, the crazy part is they could have just trained on the real deal if they'd have shot the drones down. That's the crazy part.
Man, man, honestly, that's pretty true. You would think that that would be the best sort of a scenario, best sort of a option that could be made. But for some reason, they're just going with training to eventually shoot them down. I guess they do have to learn how to engage them with proper forms of tactics and systems, but still a fairly interesting move nonetheless. Meanwhile, we also were able to hear that Poland, through the foreign minister Sikorski, who is starting to become quite popular these days due to his statements that are pretty much on the dot about the current situation in Europe, has continued to state that the Russian Federation is conducting endless escalations against not only the Republic of Poland, but Europe as a whole. We were able to hear from the Polish foreign minister Radoslaw Sikorski that he has warned that Putin is escalating, not negotiating. Russian drone and jet incursions into NATO airspace, massive defense spending, and troop buildups prove the Kremlin is not seeking peace, at least according to Radoslaw Sikorski. Sikorski calls for force first, then talks like Reagan and the USSR, or generally any US president during the Cold War with the USSR, Eisenhower, Kennedy, really the list goes on and on all the way up until Reagan himself, who was the last president, to have to deal with the Soviet Union for the larger part before they started to go into a complete collapse. According to Radoslav Sikorski, he states that the age of empires is over. And it is quite an interesting thing to hear that sort of a deal, because we generally have been seeing that for years, as a matter of fact. Quite a long time, mind you all. The Russian Federation has been trying to conduct an escalation against the West at least over the entirety of this calendar year. And it's a pretty crazy sort of a development to continue to see, and of course the Polish are calling it for what it is. They are calling a spade and continuing to state that the Russian Federation is working towards some sort of eventual war with NATO. On top of that, in the Federal Republic of Germany, just recently, we were able to hear of a drone violation, and originally when the report came out, it was at an unknown and undisclosed location where this drone violation had occurred. We now understand that this drone violation had actually occurred within the North Westphalia region of the Federal Republic of Germany, as a unidentified drone, most likely Russian according to reports, was spotted over the area and appears to have been a significant threat to NATO forces on the ground. From what we understand, it flew at an low altitude over the runway in Hellenkirchen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and the incident occurred on Wednesday evening, just yesterday. Police inspected the area, but neither the drone nor its operators were found, and security measures at the specific base have been heightened, at least according to the publishing of their Spiegel's paper, which came out today. It is still showing that some sort of foreign operators, whether it be the People's Republic of China or the Russian Federation, are continuing to use drones deep inside of the European Union and the NATO alliance to either gather intelligence or to see how far they can get a drone into an air defense perimeter without it being successfully detected. Either one is an incredibly concerning sort of a development and is continuing to show us that the Russian Federation or the People's Republic of China, which seems to be the two most likely culprits for these activities at this point, are continuing to destabilize not only the economic situation by threatening the danger of the civilian aviation in the skies over Europe, but they're also threatening the security of our military infrastructure across the whole of Europe, whether it be American or a part of our Western alliance as a whole. This is something that a lot of people have been talking about, at least as far as the European Union's declaration today that all future violations of the Russian Federation's air forces should be shot down, whether they're manned or unmanned. And a lot of people are wondering, will the European Union generally act on this? And we're not speaking about NATO at this point, folks. NATO would include the entirety of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which would include Canada, the United States, and Turkey, which are all not, and also the United Kingdom, which are all not members of the European Union. This is specifically pertaining only to European Union members. And as far as the members of the European Union that would be significant power players in terms of their armed forces, Poland, Germany, France, and Italy would probably be the largest military powers in the entirety of the European Union. And a lot of people are wondering, will they bounce forward into action and begin to finally respond to Russian air incursions? Or will they let this continue to go on even with the European Union Parliament largely giving an order today for Russian air incursions to be shot down? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
So it looks like 62% of the audience said yes, the European leaders will defend against Russia finally, and they'll finally act, while 19% said I'm about 50-50 on this one, and 15% said no, the European leaders are simply bluffing the Russian Federation. So honestly, like we've heard this talk before, this is nothing new coming from Europe, but so far we've not seen any real dedication by the European countries to actually shoot down these drones that are invading their airspace. We've heard rumors from multiple different leaders in Europe that it is Russia that's launching these attacks, but they've still not officially declared who it is from an official diplomatic sense. So until they actually say who did this, I really doubt they're going to take any strong action. I know they're issuing guidance telling their pilots to consider shooting down these Russian jets if they violate their airspace, but that's still a really big step to take. And so far, Europe's shown no real desire to actually go to war with Russia over these airspace violations. So I'm not super hopeful on it, I'll be totally honest. And I'm actually 50-50. I'm with the 19%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm actually starting to get into the ballpark of the 61%. I think at this point, they are starting to generally try and gear up to shoot down these drones. It's just that it's taking them a fairly long time to actually get themselves hyped up enough to actually be able to shoot them down. We do know, however, that the Czechs did have snipers aiming at some drones, at least recently, when they were violating airspace around the Prague International Airport. And we also know that Poland and Denmark are getting direct training and additional experience, at least from the Ukrainian liaisons that are inside of their countries, on further drone defenses. But before I get into that further, we actually have some breaking news coming out at this moment.
All right, so to get us away from this poll and the whole European situation for a second, we're currently getting breaking news literally just a couple of minutes ago. A massive earthquake has happened near the Philippines right now, near the southern Philippines, and a tsunami warning has been issued for portions of the southern Philippines, and it looks like it was a magnitude 7.6 earthquake. That's the preliminary reading, and they're saying a life-threatening wave height is expected, and it looks like we're seeing that warning there, and also it looks like the U.S. may be issuing some type of statement. I really can't tell what the U.S. is issuing, but it's definitely a statement with the Philippines right now. So a massive situation happening right this second. It looks like a devastating tsunami might be about to take place right now near the Philippines that we're seeing right now.
And that's incredibly interesting to hear, and we'll try and keep apprised of that situation as it continues to develop. I don't really have a lot of additional information to provide. That's just breaking right now at the moment, folks. But we will be trying to get more breaking news developments and information on that as it continues to come out. It does appear that there's been a high amount of activity, at least this year, especially on the western part of the Pacific Rim. We have been able to see multiple earthquakes occurring near to the area of the Kamchatka Peninsula, up near the area of Kamchatsky and Vilkovo, right near to a Russian submarine pen, and we have also been able to hear of some minor tectonic disturbances around the areas of Japan itself, although those tectonic disturbances are quite small and generally fairly normal. It does appear that there's now another major earthquake which has broken out down on the southern end of the Pacific Rim near to the Philippines, and we are going to be trying to get further information as the stream continues to stay live on that earthquake and the upcoming tsunami as it continues to progress for the larger part. So with that, we're going to be returning back to our normal news coverage, but we will be breaking here and there to be able to give you all further updates on the ongoing situation inside the Philippines. But moving on back into our news in Europe, to continue on our normal news coverage, I would generally have to say I do believe that the European Union is going to be defending against the Russian drones in the future, and we're also seeing that there is a pretty decent resolution at this point, at least within most of the Western countries, that there really is no diplomatic discourse to be had anymore with the Russians, and generally, if anything was to happen, everyone would assume that each other country has their back, like the North Atlantic Treaty Organization generally is supposed to. So I would have to be with the 60%. But moving on from that, we have also been able to see that a U.S. aircraft took a little short flight today around Europe. And when I mean short, I mean it was one of the longest ones we had ever actually seen, at least in the amount of area surveilled by this aircraft. I also have to apologize, folks. Twitter has been not really working up to spec, at least over the past year and a half because of server issues, and you can see that it's once again not really working well tonight. We've been having to battle that throughout the entirety of the day, which is always a pleasure. But we were able to see here on Flight Radar 24 A Royal Air Force RC-135 Rivet Joint has actually conducted a full-scale surveillance of the entirety of the Russian Federation's borders with the NATO alliance, including that of the entire Russian border with Finland, the entire Gulf of Finland, along with all of the Baltic states' borders, including those skirting along the border with Belarus, across the Polish border with Belarus, around the area of the state of Ukraine in its entirety through Romania, and then on into the Black Sea. This was a massive flight, and this aircraft was flying at a significant altitude of 35,000 feet, which is usually the cruising altitude for most civilian aviation, and allows you a field of view with the naked eye of about 200 miles or more, at least at that altitude. This is something that's giving us an idea that the Royal Air Force and the NATO alliance as a whole is conducting a lot of surveillance operations against the Russian Federation and the armed forces that they may have built up directly along the border regions, either with Finland, the Baltic states, Poland, or for that matter, any sort of Russian threats that may or may not exist around the areas of the borders of Ukraine, although that's generally just flying along the very border of the NATO alliance itself. That is quite a large development in its own right, and still showing us that major surveillance operations have been underway for a long time by the RC-135 Rivet Joints and the NATO alliance in its as a whole. We have also heard that inside of the eastern regions of Europe, there has been the discussion of possible military exercises by NATO and also by the European Union to try and counter Russian aggression. Hopefully this article will load. I'm so sorry, everyone. We've dealt with some technical issues last night. We're kind of dealing with them again still tonight. Hopefully one day they will get their crap together here at this platform here, and they'll actually have stuff that uploads properly. We deal with this on air and off air. I'm trying to kind of filibuster here until we get the article, but we deal with this on air and off air all the time. Twitter is kind of like on and off like a light switch sometimes, but beyond that, NATO is discussing a decisive response, according to the Financial Times, to Russian provocations in its airspace. Among the options being considered are holding military exercises along the border, especially in its most remote and unguarded areas, equipping reconnaissance drones to gather intelligence on Russian military activity, and easing the rules that fighter pilots must follow before opening fire. That's called an ROE, which is a rules of engagement. According to 4 NATO officials, the goal of the talks is to increase the costs for Moscow's hybrid warfare and to develop clear countermeasures against airspace violations. So it does appear that the NATO alliance is once again strengthening its resolve along with the European Union to face down the Russian threat both by manned and unmanned aerial systems and to shoot down any aircraft that may attempt to violate the skies of a NATO nation or the skies of a NATO alliance as a whole. I would have to generally say that the news that's coming out, at least at this moment from Europe, is incredibly positive, and it does look like there is a much greater concerted effort at this point towards collective security than we've seen in the past, and hopefully we'll see that this eventually amalgamates into the NATO alliance properly defending its skies and shooting down any airspace incursions that happen in the future from the Russian Federation or from unidentified drones. Moving on, however, out of Europe for a brief moment and all of the developments that we've had about the ongoing drone situation in the country, we have also seen inside of the Indian subcontinent region, or really more so in Central Asia, a really crazy piece of news. And a lot of people probably thought that this was going to be the United States bombing Afghanistan, but you would be totally mistaken. It's not the United States, nor the Soviet Union that's bombing Afghanistan. It's a whole other country that's bombing Afghanistan. Afghanistan cannot catch a break. I don't think in any point in history they've ever gotten a break from anyone. They are usually always getting hit or bombed by something. And today is no exception. So to give you all a little bit of a backstory here as to what happened, for a couple of months now, and we've covered this very lightly over the past few months. So if you're counting on this channel for this news, this is something that really didn't pop up on the radar too much. But in between Afghanistan and Pakistan is a decent amount of border tensions. There is a group of people that live within the southwestern region of Pakistan called the Pakistani people. And these people exist not only inside of Pakistan, but also inside of Afghanistan as well. It's actually been believed that the Islamic Republic of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is run by the Taliban, has actually been supporting and supplying some form of arms to the Pakistani independence movement, which is a declared terrorist organization not only by Pakistan, but also by the United States, and even Iran as well, which is kind of a little wild that Iran would call anyone a terrorist since they are the biggest terrorists. But beyond that, the Afghans, or the Taliban, have largely been supporting the Pakistani independence movement, and not only that, have been quite aggressive in securing their borders against the Pakistanis. And some firefights have actually broken out over the past few months sporadically between Afghanistan and Pakistan directly along the border. The largest amount of firefights that we've ever seen, at least in the amount of times that it's happened, has been around the area of the Chaman border crossing, which is right here. And there has been a huge amount of firefights that have broken out on that critical highway that leads between the two countries. This situation didn't really seem to be going anywhere, and it appeared to just be normal border skirmishes as usual. If you know anything about Afghanistan post-American withdrawal, they are in endless border skirmishes with everyone. The Iranians, the Pakistanis. Also, on top of that, we've even heard that there's been some possible run-ins with the Uzbeks and the Tajikistans, or the Tajikistanis as well. Quite a large amount. The only people they haven't bumped into are the Turkmen, but that's because the Turkmen keeps to themselves, and that's a whole other thing. But beyond that, Pakistan's had enough. So they have gone to bombing, quite truly with airstrikes today, the Taliban, or generally Afghanistan as it exists today. We were able to see actual airstrikes and bombardments with picture proof being made inside of Kabul, proving that the Islamic Republic of Pakistan's air forces were active over the area of Kabul tonight, and were bombing targets that they deemed crucial to their security interests. We do not know what these are, however, because, once again, to point this out to y'all, Afghanistan really isn't an advanced force or an advanced nation at all. A lot of its equipment, the most advanced equipment that it possesses, is the equipment that the U.S. left behind in 2021, and that equipment wasn't really the finest or the greatest. We left behind most of the scraps that weren't really worth taking back. So we don't know what the Pakistani Air Force hit inside of Pakistan. It was a significant hit, and it does appear that something is on fire down in the streets below inside of Kabul, but we still have no idea what in the world that was or what exactly they hit inside of Kabul. Beyond that, we also were able to hear that Pakistani airstrikes were pretty much blanketing the entire area south of Afghanistan in the region between Kabul and the border with Pakistan. Not the Khyber Pass area. This area is just a little bit south of that. But there were significant airstrikes that were also happening in that area as well. And I'll actually show you all. This post right here should have a map of that general area where a large amount of the airstrikes were being heard. And it actually was the Paktika province in Afghanistan. Let me see if I can pull that up for y'all. The Paktika province in Afghanistan. So this is the general province inside of Afghanistan where a large amount of airstrikes were also heard about as well. And it's quite interesting to note that we do not know if there ever will be an Taliban or an Afghan response to the situation at the moment. It's incredibly unclear whether they even have the ability to respond at all. We don't know that the Afghans have any real usable artillery. From what we understand, the most heaviest system they have, at least in terms of firepower, would be a main battle tank like a T-55 or a T-62, and those are largely assault guns, at least in how they operate, and almost have to have a direct line of sight to be able to hit anything. So we don't really know if Afghanistan even has a way to respond to the Pakistani airstrikes that were conducted today, but still a very odd occurrence, and also probably got a lot of people, because I would assume that a lot of people were clicking on the stream thinking that the US was bombing Afghanistan. Crazily enough, it's Pakistan, and that's even more weird, folks, just to put this out there, because Afghanistan and Pakistan are both largely a part of a growing Chinese sphere of influence in the region nowadays. And China is having some pretty strong relations, not only with the Pakistanis, but also with the Afghans as well. And while the Afghans have not been provided directly yet any real weaponry by the Chinese that we publicly know of, they still have given Afghanistan a decent amount of economic investments to build up their civil infrastructure, which is pretty big, at least for China's One Belt, One Road programs that they usually implement around the entirety of the Indian Ocean area. So it is a little bit crazy, I gotta say, folks, to see Pakistan bombing Afghanistan, considering that they're almost in the same sphere of influence. To describe this situation similarly, that would be like Germany bombing Denmark out of the blue because a couple of soldiers walked across the border and got shot at a little bit, and Germany got tired of it and just bombed Denmark. That would be about the equivalent, at least in the Western sphere, of what's happening right now between those two countries. We'll have to see how that goes, though. And also, I saw someone talk about Afghan opium. And you know what's actually interesting, folks, this is a little bit of an interesting side note about that, is that Afghanistan, particularly the Taliban, was actually known quite well for its opium trade back in the day. And also, it looks like we have more breaking news coming out about the earthquake in the Philippines.
All right, so breaking away for just a second to update everybody on that Philippines earthquake situation, it looks like we're currently seeing reports, and take this with a grain of salt, it's what we're hearing right now. It sounds like we're hearing that tsunami waves are possible within 300 kilometers of the earthquake epicenter, which was in the southern Philippines. After it appears to be a 7.4 earthquake, it looks like it's been readjusted a little bit, hit right off the coast. We're also hearing that tsunami waves reaching 1 to 3 meters above the tide level are possible along some coast of the Philippines after that earthquake. And we do have one video here showing what appears to be people evacuating from a regional hospital in the Philippines right after that earthquake struck. It looks like it was shaking the ground pretty damn bad that we're seeing right here. So unfortunately, if you want to show that video, we can give an idea of what that looks like.
Got you, and I'm just waiting for this thing to eventually load, and it finally has loaded, so we'll be getting that up for all of y'all right here. And here's the only clip that we have so far from, I'm assuming it's the island of Luzon in the Philippines, near to this earthquake, and here's the clip.
Pretty big pandemonium.
Yeah.
You can pause it right there. That's pretty much the most part of the video right there, but that's just to give you an idea of what that looks like. Currently a massive pandemonium right now, and obviously those people were evacuating from a regional hospital. So panic in the streets. Also, we're not sure what type of damage was sustained from this, because I'm sure there was some damage somewhere in the city. So we don't know right now, but apparently a tsunami warning is in effect for some parts of the Philippines right now.
And I also see some people giving a clarification to the location of the earthquake, and actually it appears that it was occurring on the island of Mindanao, which is on the completely opposite side than Luzon in the Philippines. So a little correction and clarification on air, folks. I actually got the island wrong. It's the island of Mindanao inside the Philippines, not Luzon. Apparently this video was taken somewhere near to Davao, which is a larger southern city in the Philippines. And the risk here that exists, folks, with an earthquake like this hitting near to the Philippines is that the Philippines, a lot like many other developing countries, does not have stringent building codes and does not build to high standards. There are a large amount of famously and well-known built slums inside of large parts of the Philippines. You can actually see some of them right here. Most of them not built to any form of a building code or any sort of an earthquake preparedness sort of a standard, meaning that these buildings are highly susceptible to collapse in the midst of an earthquake like this. That's usually why you'll see in places like Turkey, especially whenever an earthquake hits near to Istanbul, where building codes have also historically been loosely enforced, there is usually a high level of casualties due to buildings not being built to withstand an actual earthquake due to not following the building codes. So for this reason, there may actually be a large amount of casualties coming out of the Philippines here in the future, at least injuries at a minimum, and also deaths due to collapsing buildings, especially if the earthquake was close enough to land, and also especially if it hit to a city like Davao, which has a very lackadaisical sort of an implementation of building codes, if any, in most places in the city. But beyond that, a fairly interesting sort of a development to hear about. And also I saw someone say, that's actually largely middle class, what you're showing right there. It generally is, at least inside the Philippines. The Philippines, unfortunately, does not have a great standard of living for most of its citizens. And probably the worst that you can find would be inside of Manila, down here near to the harbor. These are the true slums of Manila. And if I dropped y'all down here, y'all could actually see those quite well. That's what they look like. You can generally see they're not built up to code.
Yeah, goodness, that's a little bit rough right there. Honestly, it looks like the buildings are probably definitely not earthquake proof, just by looking at them.
Yeah, interestingly enough, this has actually happened a lot like it did in Turkey for the same sort of reasons, in that a lot of people, when the Philippines started to have its own sort of an economic miracle, at least in its own sense, a lot of rural people actually moved into the cities like Manila looking for jobs and opportunities, and obviously a lot more people moved there than there were jobs. So a lot of them ended up falling on hard times, forming these slums, and these slums have existed for decades. You'll actually find almost the exact same form of a slum structure inside of Istanbul, which is also a city that went through a major population boom from the 1960s to the 1980s due to a larger amount of rural people moving from the countryside and into the city looking for jobs. And the same sorts of slums that exist in cities like Manila and Davao in the Philippines exist inside of Istanbul as well. They almost look identical. But still, that could lead to a higher amount of casualties and fatalities as a result of this earthquake. So hopefully we will not hear bad news. Hopefully there will be a very very low amount of casualties as a result of this earthquake, but also considering that the tsunami is happening close to the Philippines, there could also be additional casualties and fatalities due to the tsunami wave hitting on shore, either sweeping people out, drowning them, or collapsing buildings as a result of the incoming surge. So hopefully people will remain safe in the Philippines and seek higher ground as soon as they can, considering that it sounds that a tsunami is apparently close approaching at this point. But moving on out of that breaking news at the moment and the developments that we're getting from the Philippines, and I once again want to remind everyone that the Philippines situation is happening live on air. We will be making sure to cover this situation every time we get a breaking news update, but in between the breaking news updates, we are going to be continuing forward with the rest of our breaking news that occurred over the course of the day. So at the moment, we're going to be returning back to our normal news coverage, but I can assure y'all, if we do have any additional breaking news coming out, we will make sure to cover that as quickly as we get it. And so moving on from that and into North Korea, we also were able to see something quite interesting, at least stated today by a official of the state of Ukraine, if this will eventually load. I would love if this would load, folks. I really would. And it's not loading. Let me try that again. I got to tell y'all, folks, y'all like Twitter? I don't know. But beyond that, Ukraine's intelligence chief, Kirill Budanov, is reporting that Russia has provided North Korea with Pantsir S-1 systems. And that's a little bit interesting because he said that right after the North Korean Arms Expo picture came out, and this appears to be a Pantsir S-1 system mounted on top of a Koksan SPG gun carrier.
That's really janky looking.
Yeah, it's really janky. And from what we know, the operators of the system also wouldn't be able to operate it too well. It doesn't really appear that there's a fire control unit on board. The turret actually does not have a fire control unit inside of it. And that's something that's a little bit interesting. I'll show you that here really quickly, at least with the Pantsir S-1, because this is the system that the Russian Federation uses a great deal, is this one. This is the Pantsir S-1. This is the truck-based version of the Pantsir air defense system. How the Pantsir operates is that the turret is entirely automated, and it houses the radar system, or the radome, which you can see here on the front and also on the back. That's your targeting, acquisition, and gun ballistics radars, all in one, in an inclusive package. Inside of the turret itself is a rotary mechanism for the 30mm autocannons, and also the traverse and rotation of the turret and its missile systems. The operators of the Pantsir S-1 air defense system is not in the turret. They're actually in this box right here. You see that door. I'll actually zoom in on it. This one right here that I'm circling with the mouse cursor. There are actually 3 radar, gunnery, and air acquisition operators that are inside of that box in the back of the Pantsir, and they actually operate the turret. The issue that I'm seeing here with the Koksan SPG version of the Pantsir is that there does not appear to be a crew-served spot or location within the vehicle to actually effectively operate the Pantsir system. And that seems to be a bit of a small issue. And I'll actually show you all the Koksan SPG in its normal form. This is the vehicle right here. And if you notice the elongated cab that exists on a normal Koksan. This one has the exact same elongated cab, meaning that there's been no modifications to the crew compartment that operates the system, meaning that there really would only be room inside of that Koksan for a driver and a commander, and that would be it. So I do not know how this thing is actually supposed to operate in an air defense role. It most likely would operate quite poorly, considering the lack of any sort of radar or gunnery operators for the air defense system, but a fairly interesting development nonetheless, and it does appear that Kirill Budanov's statements are backed up with merit. There's an actual picture of one of these inside of the North Koreans' Arms Expo, or at least some sort of an RC mock-up, possibly. But moving on out of North Korea, and on out of that news, we do also have to get to the major news that's been coming out of Venezuela lately, and we've been actually getting some fairly interesting developments over yesterday and today about the situation going on in Venezuela. We were able to hear that there were significant training exercises going on near to the area of Trinidad and Tobago. A lot of y'all know about Trinidad and Tobago. It's a little island right here with a city called the Port of Spain. Which I assume must be very confusing to people, you know, like you go to a port in Spain or you go to the Port of Spain, which isn't even in Spain, it's in Trinidad and Tobago. But beyond that, We have been able to see that yesterday, a flight of Little Bird light attack helicopters, or they might be some form of a Little Bird in general, not an attack helicopter, but just a utility helicopter, along with a Black Hawk helicopter with the U.S. Army's 160th Special Aviation Regiment, the 160th SOAR, likely attached to the MV Ocean Trader, which is a roll-on, roll-off ship customized for Special Forces operations, were spotted conducting training operations off of the coast of Trinidad and Tobago earlier this week, only miles off of the shore of Venezuela. Crazily enough, folks, these pictures that you're seeing right here were actually taken from Venezuela of the training operations, giving you a little bit of an idea about how close this actually was conducted. We can all tell that they had to zoom in about times 20 on the iPhone to get this view, but this is still close enough you could see it from shore, which is quite interesting. Also, it's even more interesting for that fact that there appears to be continued buildups of American military activity near to Trinidad and Tobago today, as we also were able to see a C-17 Globemaster beelining it directly to Trinidad and Tobago today. Its altitude was 30,000 feet at the time of its photograph, which was taken at this point, but it is quite interesting, and it does appear that the aircraft was going to arrive at the port of Spain inside of Trinidad and Tobago. This has led some people to actually believe that the United States Armed Forces may not just be basing inside of Puerto Rico, but they may also be basing, at the invitation of Trinidad and Tobago, forces inside of the island. This would leave the United States of America literally only miles away from the Venezuelan coastline, and while this isn't an opportune spot in every sense of the measure, considering that it's not directly near to major population centers on shore, it does allow the United States power projection abilities, especially for its special forces, just over the coast of Venezuela. But before we get on into the rest of our analysis of the ongoing Venezuelan developments right now, we do have further breaking news coming out from the Philippines.
Yes, we do. Also, by the way, real quick, I want to issue a correction on stream, by the way. We do not know if Twitter's having a problem tonight. It could be our internet. We do not know where the problem's actually sourcing from. So we're not blaming Twitter, by the way. I just want to make that clear because we don't know where the problem is sourcing from, just to make that perfectly clear. But moving on to our breaking news right now, we are seeing another major earthquake right now off the coast of Papua New Guinea. It's a magnitude 6 earthquake. It's about 100 miles away from the coast of Papua New Guinea, and it looks to be a pretty big one as well. Also, we're seeing aftershocks in the Philippines around the same area of 5.9 and 5.6. So very seismically active tonight. It looks like there's earthquakes happening in multiple different areas, with the largest definitely being right off the coast of the Philippines. So very, very big news on that indeed. But Enforcer, what say you?
That's a fairly interesting development. It does appear that there's major tectonic activity happening along the entirety of the region near to the Philippines and Papua New Guinea. If you actually look at this on a normal satellite view, you can generally see where this is actually happening, at least near to the area of the Marianas Trench, near to the Northern Marianas Islands, or this other trench that exists directly off the Philippines. I forgot the exact name of that one, but still, a fairly interesting development to hear about nonetheless. It's giving us an idea that there are a large amount of earthquakes now breaking out within this area, and it appears that the situation will now not only encompass the Philippines, and especially the southern Philippines, but will also encompass the island of New Guinea for the larger part, the entirety of New Guinea. And that's a fairly unfortunate sort of a deal to hear about, considering that the Philippines and New Guinea, as islands, or a series of islands, are generally in the same situation as far as their ability to protect themselves against the incoming tsunamis. So we will be making sure to keep you all up to date on that development as it's continuing to progress throughout the night, but we do have additional news of another outbreak of another earthquake that has occurred once again tonight. So with that, we are going to be returning back to our news and developments that we have been able to hear about inside of the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, as we also were able to hear of a successful test by the Air Forces, or the U.S. Air Force at Eglin Air Force Base, of the first test wing XQ-55A Valkyrie stealth unmanned combat aerial vehicle, the UCAV, which you can see in that picture right there. According to the information published by the United States Air Force, the test reportedly took place at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida as part of the Top Gun AI program, representing a major milestone in integrating AI-driven autonomous systems into combat aviation. During the flight, the Valkyrie not only maintained formation with the manned aircraft, but also demonstrated autonomous interception of simulated aerial targets, situational awareness, and the ability to perform limited air combat maneuvers, which is a major step forward for the autonomous systems of the U.S. Air Forces, and also the power projection abilities and firepower multiplication abilities of the United States Air Force due to AI assistance in the skies. This, I gotta say, y'all, the XQ-58 is a pretty wacky looking little system. Now, let me actually show y'all that a little bit up close, at least a better picture of it. This is at least a side profile, one of the best ones we have of the XQ-58, and I gotta be honest with y'all, this thing's pretty cool. From what we know, it's generally already been shelved, from what I understand, by the Air Force as an actual usable system, but it is pretty much a testbed and proving ground for future systems. So while this thing is never going to see real combat service, the XQ-58 is generally walking so that way future aircraft, like the wingmen of the F-47 or the wingmen of the future F-35s, will be able to run, at least in an air combat scenario. It's a very interesting sort of a development to see, and once again showing us that the U.S. military is working around the clock to be able to make sure that we have the most advanced and cutting-edge aerial warfare implements known to man currently. Or at least we'd hope. I mean, what the hell are they doing with that $1.2 trillion budget otherwise? I think it's like 1.1 or something like that nowadays, but who's counting? Anyways, beyond that though, a lot of people have also heard, as we have as well, that Venezuela is still fortifying key infrastructure sites around the country in anticipation for a military exchange with the United States. And it does seem that both sides are still hunkering in for some sort of a greater conflict. And also we got an absolute curveball out of left field, as we also heard today that Qatar, of all countries, is quietly trying to mediate between the United States and Venezuela, encouraging dialogue between the President of the United States and the President of Venezuela. Which is something that I really didn't expect at this point. That's a little crazy, folks. You know, like Qatar, out of all countries, the one trying to encourage this. You would think it would be a country inside of Central America, not wanting the heat to come that way. You know, just be like, hey, look, we don't want to destabilize the area economically because of this. Let's just let this all pass. No, it's actually Qatar, of all countries, that's trying to get that going. So, I mean, good on them. I mean, it's always good to have a diplomatic third party out there trying to mediate the two sides, but that was a real curveball from anywhere that I would have ever expected today. But beyond that, we have been hearing a lot of people talking about the U.S. Special Forces training and operations that we're seeing miles off of the coast from Venezuela at Trinidad and Tobago. And a lot of people are wondering, what was the United States doing behind that? Or better yet, what the SOF doing with the butter on it? But Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So the big question is right now is we're seeing the U.S. Army Special Operations Forces training in their little birds right off the coast of Venezuela. Is it merely U.S. intimidation or is it more than that? And it looks like 64% said no. It is actually real prep for real raids inside of Venezuela, while 15% said yes, it's just a major bluff and it's merely intimidation. And another 15% said I'm 50-50 on this one. So I would say personally, with the Spec Ops ship, which is apparently where those little birds were launched from, that's currently still lurking around the area. I can't remember the exact name of the ship. I think it's the MV Ocean Trader or something. Yeah, I believe that's the name of it right there. It's a ship which is rumored to be a special operations ship used by the U.S. military, but it's very murky. Nobody knows really any details about it in the public, except for it's rumored to be that. So the little birds were flying around, and it looks like they're doing drills of some sort, some type of special operations training drills. And we've also heard rumors that the U.S. might be planning to do special operations raids into Venezuela in targeted areas to take out certain individuals that might be a threat to the U.S. So it could be real prep. I'm a little bit 50-50 on it right now because I personally think the U.S. is moving toward land strikes from the air. I think that might be what they're going to do first and then maybe raids after that. So I'm actually with the 15%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I believe that this is more so an intimidation tactic at the moment than anything, because we do have to remember, folks, that every single time the U.S. military is seen by an adversary, like photographed today, it is for an intentional and specific purpose. Psychological operations, or non-war military activities, as the Chinese would put it, are incredibly important to trying to intimidate your enemy and get inside of their mind and freak them out, where they'll make rash or poor decisions that will not be to their advantage, but will be poorly planned and generally a knee-jerk reaction. And I would generally say that that's what we're seeing today from the Special Forces training that happened in Trinidad and Tobago, because it is something to say this, folks, that it does not take a lot to deduce that that is the Special Forces, because if you look at the pictures, I'll show you all those from yesterday. If you look at these pictures here, this Black Hawk in this picture has a probe, and there is only one helicopter type in the U.S. Army that has that probe, and it is only the MH-60s that are connected to the Special Aviation Regiments, or the Special Operations Aviation Regiments, the MH-60 SOAR. These are made to be able to conduct prolonged aerial operations, hence the reason for the giant refueling probe. To show you all this picture, this is actually a pretty cool one, they can actually conduct in-air refueling, which allows for them to extend the range of the helicopters and to conduct pretty much nearly off the grid, considering the helicopters can fly low enough and have enough maneuverability at those altitudes to largely remain undetectable to radar, deep penetration operations without being detected by enemy forces and their air defense radars. This means that this definitely is showing that the MV Ocean Trader has to be within the area, and that these helicopters here, the MH-60s from the SOAR, are definitely a part of the Ocean Trader's complement. The Ocean Trader is designed, to show you all this here really quickly. The Ocean Trader is designed, if I can find you all a picture of it from the top down. Yeah, here we are. Yeah, with 2 giant helicopter decks, and also a big helipad. So it is designed to be able to operate special operations forces like the 160th SOAR off of the decks of the Ocean Trader. So I would guarantee y'all that these came from the 160th, and this is supposed to be freaking the Venezuelans out. The Venezuelans know that there will not be a chance of really detecting or stopping a U.S. Special Forces raid until it has already happened. The damage will have been dealt by then, or the critical information and intelligence or reconnaissance that would be needed would also have been gathered by then as well. So I would generally say that this is a psychological operation, but also this could be a basing potentially, or an attempt to make the Venezuelans believe that there is a basing of the 160th SOAR and the SOF inside of Trinidad and Tobago. This area is a little unpopulated, and as far as it would go, at least for the United States military operation, this is the best place, if any, for the Special Forces to actually penetrate the country and conduct a deep penetration operation with rotary wing helicopters like those. There's really no one living through here, and very little Venezuelan military armed forces are present here as well. If they wanted to, they could just fly from Trinidad and Tobago several hundred miles into the country, drop off a Special Forces unit, and then fly right back out, most likely undetected. That might start to freak out the Venezuelan government. That might be the intention, to where the Venezuelans will try a preemptive strike against the United States and finally give us the diplomatic justification we would need to go all in. Or at least that might be the hope psychologically that's intended with these physically being seen today from the coast of Venezuela. But that would be my
Honestly, I would say it's very, very likely, in my personal opinion, because I see people saying this in the live chat as well. It's very possible, with the special forces being right off the coast, that there probably already are strategic insertions of these operators inside of Venezuela. That would be my guess, because the first step you'd want to do is put people and put them on the ground, so that way you can know targeting data and get all this intel beforehand. You'd want to get that ahead of time. So I would be very shocked if there already weren't penetrations into their territory in limited forms by covert operators to get that data, because if we're preparing to do strikes from the air, you will need that for accurate targeting. So they've probably gotten in somehow. I don't know how they got in. That's the one part we wouldn't know. They could have maybe swam in. They could have maybe dove in. There's no telling how they got in, but it's very possible, in my opinion.
I would have to say that the high likelihood is that they would have just flown them in, because having them swim to shore and dropping them off in pretty much the middle of a swamp, that would be near impossible, because to get out of that swamp to anything that would count for anything, you'd have to go about 50 miles, which on foot through a swamp could take well over 5 days to a week. And of course, these forces are self-sufficient and can operate well on their own, but they still cannot really resupply with any sort of food without running into a populated area or something along those lines. They can try and forage, but once again, in a swamp, that would be rather difficult. And also, the sorts of threats posed by the natural wildlife of killing the Special Forces operators, or at least several of them demanding an evac, would also be fairly high within that area. So I would pretty much expect that they would have dropped them off somewhere here inside of the more flatter lands, maybe near to a jungle area, like these areas here that are a little bit more vegetated, so that way there's a little bit more cover for the insertion. But still having them swim in, or really dropping them off from the shore and having them boat in, that would be pretty tough for them to make it further on inland, especially if this was the area where the insertion was done. Now, on the coastline in the north, that's definitely possible quite easily, but over here, that would be next to impossible for them to make any sort of progress getting out of the swamp.
Honestly, I would say it's probably relatively easy to get into Venezuela because they really don't have many border protections or border controls. Now, obviously, they have a border force, but it's not robust like the United States border force. So, if they want to sneak somebody in, they could probably just do it the obvious way and just send them across using a false identification through the border. Let's say through Colombia or Guyana. They could do it that way. That could be another way. It could be more straightforward than even what we're thinking. So, I would imagine though the bottom line is, however they got in, I would imagine that there's probably plenty of people already there because, for example, if they're going to do strikes in populated areas, you can't just guesswork that from the sky. That you could try to do that, but your odds of civilian casualties would be very, very high. So they got to have that. My guess is if they're going to do aerial strikes, it's probably not going. It's probably not going to be out in the woods or out in the jungle. It'll probably be more toward the populated areas, probably in the outskirts of it, and for a warning shot would be my guess.
I would say that probably would be the case. I also saw someone ask, what kind of dangerous wildlife is in there? Generally, everything that you could find in most of South America, jaguars, anacondas, those sorts of a deal, those are quite dangerous. And if you're not paying attention, and even if you are paying attention, they're really hard to see. They're masters at stealth. They can end up getting the jump on you and either seriously wounding one of the operators or killing them well early on into the mission. I also saw some people talking about, what about the major river going through this area? It is a possibility that that could be used, but the issue with that, with really any river, is that they may be heavily traveled by the civilian population, meaning that you may be seen, and then your infiltration is compromised, especially if you're traveling in by boat. So generally what you would want to do, at least if I was to say what usually would have happened historically, is to get them in as quickly as possible and as undetectable as possible and as far inland as they possibly can be. So what they would do is that they would fly in a helicopter and just drop them off and then leave them somewhere where they really wouldn't be detected, but close enough to a populated area where they could either conduct some sort of a listening post operation, set up a listening post, conduct reconnaissance, or in some situations, they might just hang out with a laser designator, wait until a specific set time, and then just point the laser designator at something and let a JDAM land on it. That's also something that they could do as well. The special forces are incredibly versatile. They can really conduct any kind of operations, including raids behind the lines to confuse and disorient the enemy, and also wipe out key critical infrastructure. But generally, I would assume that they most likely were not dropped off in the swamp directly. They would most likely be dropped off well past the swamp. But anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on into the rest of the news that we have for the night. But before we do, folks, I have to say that tonight is an amazing return to streaming. We have already been running the stream for an hour now, and 61,000 people have watched this stream within the first hour. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of folks. And not only that, there's about 16,000 people here live right now. And I got to say, a huge thanks to all of y'all so much for sticking with it last night in the middle of our tech difficulties. We do not really know exactly what caused it. We have two running theories at the moment. And for operational security purposes on our end, we really cannot say exactly what they were. But beyond that, it does appear that the situation was fixed. And it looks like everything's running fine. I got to thank y'all for having the patience and understanding about that issue. We felt so bad about that last night. You know, it was as frustrating for us as it was for y'all, for sure. And thankfully, we are back on. We've had practically no lag throughout the entire night, which is a great thing to see again. But with that in mind, I do want to make sure to thank you all for having some amazing patience on us and letting us get back to stream when we could. And because of that, I want to make sure that we can get a couple of questions from the chat before we move on into the rest of the news that we have for the night. So Matthew, what do we got?
And also, by the way, folks, if you threw in a super chat last night, I have all of them in the spreadsheet tonight, so they will be addressed. And once again, sorry we couldn't get to it last night, but of course, those tech issues were plaguing us quite badly. Very annoying last night. But jumping into our first super chat here, this one goes to Bobby43, also known as LC39A, and he puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Bobby, for that support last night. He said, with all this lag, it's going to be a long show, LOL. And it turns out it was actually a really short show. It was actually one of the shortest shows in the history of the channel, actually. And we got off the stream and we wept for at least 2 hours. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to say, it was actually not that long of a stream. It was really short. And then the second one came on and it was even shorter. But I would have to say, I thank you so much for being here with us again tonight, Bobby, and also sticking with us. And I got to thank you for the support, because when it went down, I'll tell you all a little bit of what happened, at least with our reaction. Unfortunately, folks, I'll try and explain it a little bit more, but I can't explain too much. there seems to have been a problem with the internet that was well out of our control, or at least a server issue of some sort that was well out of our control that we couldn't have fixed at all, and generally we just kind of had to wait for it to pass. So we tried desperately. When the first stream went live, it was lagging so bad. Everything else was working fine, and we were racing to figure out what was wrong before we went live. We then went live, and it just didn't work. So then we had to cut the stream short, and then we moved on and into trying to eventually work some form of another show that night. We did everything we could. We got everything back up. And then we only ran a stream for 30 seconds. It flatlined again. And then we shut it off. And then we just went into problem-solving mode, trying to figure out what else could be wrong rather than what we thought was wrong. And it appears that it was something that was generally out of our control. I cannot get into specifically what that is. It's an operational security and sort of a deal with that. But beyond that, I got to say, it was unfortunately not a long stream last night. It was incredibly short, and I absolutely hated that. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support, Bobby. I hope that has addressed it well. And thank you also for being here with us tonight and supporting the channel tonight as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our second super chat also goes to Bobby43, who puts in another $50 support. This one was put in tonight, actually. And thank you very much, Bobby, for the support tonight as well. He said, "Did I make the cut?" And yes, you made the cut. You made the cut. They said he's gonna get right in there, and he did. He got number 2. That's what they say. But thank you very much, Bobby, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you greatly, Bobby43, because you do make the cut. You do make the cut. I saw some people saying, great reference. I don't know what the reference is. Like, unfortunately, I don't know what the reference is. But you did make the cut, Bobby. You did make the cut. And I gotta thank you incredibly for supporting the channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Because folks like you help to keep the gears turning and the wheels burning back here behind the scenes, so that way Enforcer HQ can continue to work each and every day on putting out more news. News every day, all day, endlessly, forever and ever, without stopping, without pause, without ceasing, without even tiring. It's a crazy sort of a thing, what y'all folks allow us to do with y'all support and just generally watching, even if you're not supporting. And I gotta thank you all so much once again, especially you, Bobby, for your support and helping this channel to keep rolling so that way we can keep this thing alive even when it's hardly hanging on like last night. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night.
All right, so our last one here goes to Waba, who puts in a $25 donation, and thank you very much, Waba, for that support as well. He said, "Here's some money for a new modem." And it was actually not a problem with the modem as far as we could tell, Waba, but thank you very much for the support fund there, the tech support fund, that is, and we shall have to use that for the tech support fund. I'll tell you all this, we actually found a way to fix that next time it happens. It was an issue of changing one little setting that I can't get into, but it wasn't our fault, though. It was a problem with the servers, as far as we can tell. That seems to be the problem, and I won't get into it more than that. So we found a way to switch it to a backup server, so that way it actually works. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And I'd have to say, I thank you for sticking with us and having the gumption to be here tonight and enjoy this channel once again. I got to thank you greatly, because it is folks like you who have helped to make this channel possible and help us to keep this thing running day in and day out. So an incredibly massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address it wildly well. And so with that, a humongous thanks to you. And with that, it is time for us to get on into the rest of the news for the night, which we have a lot of, folks. We have so much of, lots of. And you know what? We got to get into it, folks. We got to get into it. Moving us on into Ukraine, we are going to give you all the update, the ill-awaited update, all the way from yesterday on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, because it was in the title yesterday that was in critical condition. It still is in critical condition today. We have been able to hear that, according to Kyiv Independent, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is in a critical state. To summarize what has been put out from the most recent updates given by the Ukrainian government to the Kyiv Independent, the situation at the power plant has not evolved in any way. It is exactly the same as it was as the last time we reported on it. All of the generators are still running, the power plant still has not been reconnected to the grid, and it's been in this condition as of today for 15 straight days. The generators are only expected to run for about 20 days, meaning that there's about 5 days left before the generators run out of fuel. And we've already been able to hear days before this update Actually, it was the last time we got an update that the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, also added on that one of the generators within one of the reactor halls had already failed and was no longer operational due to a lack of maintenance. So it does appear at the moment that the situation is incredibly dire, and the Ukrainians are now lobbing accusations of the Russian Federation that they are prolonging the situation as a form of nuclear terrorism for the larger deal. If this situation does not improve within the next 4 to 6 days, we are actually expecting that there may be some form of a limited meltdown at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. We have heard that it's going to be somewhat similar to 3 Mile Island, or it might be a little bit worse than that, but we are not expecting a Chernobyl-style nuclear meltdown to where it turns into a massive steam explosion and then literally blasts open a reactor hall. It will not be great, I will say that, but it also will not be the most severe thing that's happened as far as nuclear disasters are concerned in terms of radioactive fallout. The other problem, however, with this is that while it may not be initially up front as bad, the situation that does make it bad, however, in the long term, is that it's in the middle of an active war zone, and it doesn't really appear that the Russian Federation is willing to bring a ceasefire within the area, even for any sort of liquidation efforts to be attempted by anyone, including themselves, meaning that the radiation might just continue to emit almost as a poison in the area as long as the war keeps going, pretty much putting a timer on the conflict. Otherwise, this entire land of Ukraine, especially around the Dnipro or the Dnipro River reservoir near Novokakhovka, could be polluted well on into the future with radioactive isotopes from the nuclear reactors in their meltdown. So not really a great situation. And I also want to add this as well out there to some folks. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is directly along the Novokakhovka reservoir, and while it's completely emptied out, the Dnipro River still does flow through this area down on towards Kherson. This river feeds hundreds of thousands, if not well over a million or a couple of million people with their supply of water, and not only that, that water filters out into the greater Black Sea. If the Russians do let this power plant go into a meltdown, this could end up contaminating the water supply for well over a million people downstream from this power plant, which could also be an even worse situation. But we do have more breaking news at this moment coming out from the southwestern Pacific.
All right, so we are getting some more news about that earthquake and tsunami warning that the Philippines is currently experiencing right now. And we are hearing that apparently the water is now receding. There's been eyewitnesses reporting the water receding from the coast. We do have a video of that. And Enforcer, we can show a small little piece of that video, like maybe 5 or 10 seconds of it to give people an idea of what we're looking at here. But it looks like we're seeing the early stages of a tsunami that is likely to come in on the coast near the southern Philippines. So we're told maybe 1 to 3 meters. That's currently the speculation, and we don't know exactly how bad it's going to be. But this was a pretty large quake, and it appears to be a shallower quake as well, which seems to indicate it's going to be
I want to pause.
pretty severe.
Here's the clip. For some reason, I could not pause it, but here's a short part of the clip, which is showing that the water is receding. But go ahead, Matthew.
So we did see here that the water appears to be receding right there, but also we do have another video showing more building damage. Not too much to see from it. It's just a bunch of falling debris from a ceiling here, it looks like. So you can see a little bit of that right here in the video. Man, he's loud as hell, I'll tell you.
Damn, I'm like, dude, I was like, okay, it won't be too loud. I clicked it again and my ears are bleeding. So I'm going to only play this for a few seconds, folks, but y'all won't be able to hear us at all while this is playing.
Lord!
Quite obviously, this is a very severe earthquake.
Yeah, and it looks like everything's falling from the ceilings. The lights are falling, so it was quite severe, as you would expect. But the big deal to me is that tsunami, which looks like it's about to happen. It looks like a tsunami is imminent, and hopefully it's not a bad one. But usually when the water recedes, like we're seeing here in the video, that usually indicates it might be something severe. So hoping for the best, but I'm not really sure right now.
It's definitely showing with the water receding that there is going to be a tsunami swell that will come in as a result of this. We just don't know how tall it's going to be at the moment. I don't really think they have a lot of information about the tsunami or its swell or how tall that's going to become at this point. But it does appear that this is sizing up to be a very significant earthquake and tsunami within the area. We can already see that the damage is significant, and it does appear that at least the ceilings of some buildings are not faring too well, at least at this point, inside of the southern Philippines from the earthquake. Hopefully we will not hear of a large amount of building collapses in that area either. But moving on from that, and on out of that area and on into the area of the Middle East, we have been able to hear of further developments within this region about the Israel-Hamas ceasefire. We were able to hear yesterday, just getting all through these updates, I'm going to just knock them out really quick and then we're going to try and move on from this area. We were able to hear that the war in Gaza has now ended and peace in the Middle East is now assured. We also were able to hear further developments that checkpoints were to be reopened by the Israelis. Although earlier this morning, some Palestinians were trying to return to some areas, and Israeli tanks were firing directly at them with their main guns. We didn't show that clip because it was from a major news agency, but it was quite wild to see. Beyond that, we did also hear today inside the Gaza Strip that the ceasefire is now in full effect. This is just phase 1, by the way. This is not a full ceasefire. This is just the beginning of one. And we also were able to hear that apparently Hamas leadership has claimed that they've received security guarantees from the United States, which is a little interesting. We also were able to hear that U.S. observers will also be sent to Israel to help support and monitor the ceasefire deal in Gaza, according to the Associated Press. So it does appear that there has been some actual progress, limited progress being made, at least inside of the state of Israel and the Gaza Strip, on securing a ceasefire, at least at the moment. One thing I do have to tell y'all at the moment as well is that we don't really have a lot of information about what is actually been agreed to in the ceasefire so far as hostage exchanges and so on. We don't really, we have an idea a little bit that the hostages are going to be released. They haven't been released yet, and the ceasefire is going into effect, and we have seen this before, mind you all, and the hostages just weren't released, and then this all started up again, and I think that's happened about twice now, if I'm not mistaken. We covered it both times it happened, if I'm not wrong. So I gotta be honest with y'all, it's looking kind of good for now, but considering that we're working with Hamas, there really is no guarantee that this will go well for any long period of time. So, take that for what you will. Still, a lot of people are talking about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant crisis inside of Ukraine. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so let's return back to the situation with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and that crisis, because we're currently running a poll on it, and the poll says a Ukrainian official says that Russia plans to use this nuclear crisis to switch over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant to the Russian power grid and use it as an excuse to do so. So what are your thoughts about that theory? 73% said it sounds very likely to me, while 8% said it sounds very unlikely, and 7% said it seems like something else that the Russians have up their sleeve. So right now, anybody's theory pretty much runs at the moment because we don't know exactly what the details are about the situation. The details are very vague around this nuclear situation. All we know right now is the Russians allegedly have not connected back to the power grid, which is relying on diesel generators to keep the plant running and cooling the fuel, which is very precarious. That's what we know right now. At least that's what we think we know right now because the details are very sparse. So I would say I would tend to believe the Ukrainian official. It sounds likely to me that they could be using it for a provocation for that. That seems likely. The only other reason they would be doing this is if they're trying to basically do some type of nuclear terrorism against the West. That's the only other reason. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I think that the Russians may use this as a reason to connect the power plant to the Russian grid, I would assume, but it's not really like time is on their side. It has to be reconnected to a power grid within the next several days, so I would say that that's actually a little unlikely considering that there's a practical limitation, at least for a time limit, on building high voltage lines to the power plant. Unless they can do that within the next 4 days, or the next 5 days, they're going to be out of luck on that idea, or at least that plan at the moment. So that would be my 2 cents on it. And so it's time for me to move y'all into the rest of this news for the day. And oh buddy, folks, oh buddy, y'all better strap in. The news, it only gets more interesting from here. Let me get y'all out to the whole American-Russian thing going on right now. So moving us into Russia really quickly, just to cover everything that's happened in the central government's realm of control today, we were able to see that Vladimir Putin actually met with the president of Azerbaijan, and he was looking a lot like that Smeagol creature, like my precious, on that hairline. I mean, that's rough. That's rough. Apparently, this picture was not shown inside of Russia, but it was shown in Azerbaijan. And also, it doesn't appear that the Azerbaijani guy, I think he's like 6'7", he's taking this too seriously. He looks like he's looking at Putin like a joke. But we also were able to hear, additionally, that according to Gerasimov, who is famous, by the way, for Shoigu Gerasimov, he stated that the Russian troops are advancing in the Zaporizhzhia direction in all directions. And he also stated the priority is to strike Ukrainian missile and drone production facilities. The only problem with that is that the Russians really aren't advancing in Zaporizhia. In some areas, they get about 100 meters a day, which is nothing. That's a snail's pace, and that's not really an advance. Everyone can get 100 meters a day if they try. Even the Ukrainians do when they put their hearts into a half-hearted offensive in a small area just to destabilize the Russian offensive. They can gain a couple of 100 meters. So this isn't really anything that's too big, and they're of course hyping it up a great deal. We also were able to hear that at the same time today, according to the Kremlin and the spokesperson, the Rat, Dmitry Peskov, dialogue between Russia and the United States has been put on a serious pause. That's the Kremlin's words today. Y'all need to remember this one very much right now. To put this to memory, because this will become important in about 2 minutes. So let's all remember this. Let's all say it together. Dialogue between Russia and the United States has been put on a serious pause. That's the Kremlin today. Make sure to remember that. Write that down if you have to. That will be very important. I'm not kidding, in like 2 minutes. So, it's clear the Russians do not want to talk. They also are dealing with a plummeting stock market, which has fallen quite a significant amount just over the last month. It has lost a huge margin of the share value. It's actually massive if you look at it from about the early part of September to today. It's a huge part of the market share that's been lost. Now, let's move out of the Russian central government and let's move to the U.S. federal government, because I want you all to remember that the talks are on a serious pause. That's according to the Russians. They are not willing to talk about an end to the war. Putin just got done yesterday saying that the war was entirely justified and there was nothing wrong and the invasion in 2022 was sound. I want you to remember all of that, because now we are going to Washington, D.C., because we were able to hear that peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia are coming around again, according to the president of the U.S. of A. He was speaking today to the president of Finland, who took another visit to the United States, and he did state that Ukraine and Russia will soon sit down at the negotiating table again. Again, everyone.
Also, you can show that, by the way. You can show that, by the way, if you want. It's from the White House.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll show it then.
This would be number 8. The one I thought that I was going to make, and I think we will probably, is because it's a ridiculous war. It's a horrible war. The worst since World War II. If you look at the people doing is Russia, Ukraine. I think we'll do that too. We've a lot of reasons for them to do it, and I think they'll be coming to the table pretty soon.
Interesting. They kind of like said push the table farther away, and now they're coming back to the table. Honestly, that sounds like just a hopeful statement. It doesn't really sound like a commitment to get back to the table. It just sounds like one of those statements like, okay, one day we'll be having peace again. It's just kind of a meaningless statement, honestly.
It's a meaningless statement, but it's very tiresome considering that we've seen the Russians pretty much insult the entire republic to our face 8 times now. And also, the imp came to Alaska, and, and now we're still nowhere, and then we're still saying that eventually we're going to have a peace talk with them, and eventually... Like, we ought to be entirely on the warpath at this point with the statements coming out of the United States. We should be saying that the Russians will pay unless if they end this war. There is no hope at a peaceful resolution at this point. They've made that incredibly clear. We ought to be going in and making them pay quite dearly for what they've been doing, and then through that alone, they'll change their minds, hopefully, and then come to the negotiating table. We also were able to hear that eventually Russia might get sanctioned. I cannot show this one because it isn't from the White House, but the question posed by the reporters was, are you planning to impose more sanctions on Russia at this point? The president responded, yeah, I might. And so we're still seeing that there is no real sanctions. There's a concept of sanctions, but there is no implementation of sanctions. We also were able to hear, additionally, that a security guarantee was given to Finland. That was a fairly positive thing. The President of the United States did say that the U.S. will defend Finland if Russia attacks the Finnish state. So we do know that at least the United States is dedicated to defending Eastern allies in the NATO alliance. That's at least a positive note.
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting though, because I don't know if maybe the reporter here is just emphasizing that just to emphasize it, but that was something that we already were obligated to do by treaty already. Because if NATO invokes Article 5 and Finland's attacked, then we have a legal duty. We're bound to actually defend Finland. So it's not like a groundbreaking statement or something. I guess he's just reaffirming that commitment, I guess. But technically, we couldn't just shirk it unless we planned on backing out of the whole NATO alliance.
Well, remember though, Matthew, Article 5 5 doesn't actually lay out that you have to militarily respond. You just have to respond in some way. So you could just give arms to someone or give them moral support or intelligence support. You don't have to directly respond with the force of arms.
Yeah, but I don't think he said respond with like troops on the ground. I think he just said defend. If you go back and look at that wordage there, it looks like it was pretty vague. Like there wasn't any commitment to put troops on the ground or anything.
Well, if the U.S. will defend Finland if Russia attacked them, that's a fairly clear statement.
That's the language of the NATO charter though. It's the same language in there.
I'm not really sure actually. Let me check that because I think it might be a little bit more descript or a little bit more vague in the NATO charter. So let's see if we can get the NATO charter up, if it'll load. Hopefully it will. How's y'all's families tonight, folks? Are your families doing well? How's work going? Oh look, Jack. We got the NATO charter. The charter bus. The buses. You got the bus. That boy be bussing. On that. Moving on down to Article 5. The parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all, and consequently they agree that if such an armed attack occurs, each of them, in exercise of the right of individual or collective self-defense recognized by Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations, will assist the party or parties so attacked by taking forthwith, individually and in concert with the other parties, such actions as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force, which is an option, not a necessity, to restore and maintain the security of the North Atlantic Treaty. Any such armed attack and all measures shall be reported by the Security Council to the United Nations. Such measures shall be terminated when the Security Council, blah, blah, blah. So, I would have to say that saying the United States will defend Finland is a lot more of a stronger worded statement than Article 5 itself, because Article 5 just says, we'll take actions deemed necessary to our defense, including the use of armed force, but not necessitating the use of armed force or any sort of an active defense of another country.
Maybe so, possibly, but I think generally it's about the same thing. The bottom line is basically just a confirmation of the commitment to the NATO articles, in my personal opinion.
I would generally believe so. I think we have just a small disagreement on it, but I think that actually meant that we would conduct an armed support or defense of the NATO alliance, including Finland, which I suppose, while the rest of it, I got to be honest with y'all, the whole idea of even going to the table right now with the Russians, that one's coming past. We've got to let that one go and revisit that here in a couple of months or a year when it looks like the Russians actually want to talk. So I find those kinds of comments to be pretty silly. But saying that we will defend Finland and we will continue to support our NATO obligations, I think that that's a very good sort of a thing to come out of today, because it is showing that at least at a minimum we're not going to waffle and just leave the European portion of NATO high and dry. But moving on from that, we also got to hear that apparently Spain now needs to be booted from the NATO alliance, just a curveball out of nowhere, because of their low defense spending, according to the president. There is no way, by the way, folks, in the NATO charter to boot someone from the alliance. There is no physical way to actually do that according to the charter. The only way someone can get booted from the alliance is if they leave on their own volition. So there really is no way to boot them out. So that statement is largely pointless. Anyways, moving on from that, we also were able to hear inside the Russian Federation that a little pipeline up in the Ural Mountains caught on fire today. A fire is currently burning at the Efemovka oil pumping station on the Kubyshev-Tikhoretsk pipeline, which runs between the Ural Mountains and the Black Sea, following a drone strike earlier tonight by Ukraine. And that thing's glowing red. Call that the red light district. The way the Russians be blowing up. But beyond that, pretty wild sort of an occurrence. We also were able to see down in the area of the Penza Oblast, if that's what it's called, the Russians are moving in their finest. Let me show you. Look at that. All BTRs. It's like they're running out of equipment.
I wonder what they're bringing this in for. I was wondering if maybe they're just replenishing their stocks, or are they preparing for a new offensive? I really couldn't tell. It's very hard to figure out what this is, but obviously it's a lot of fresh ones, which is apparently fresh off the factory line, maybe, possibly.
Oh, no, these are coming from supply yards. BTR-80s are old.
Oh, you don't think they're manufacturing this old stuff anymore?
Oh, no, not a BTR. They got so many of these sitting around in random lots in Russia, they can just pull those out, refurbish them a little, and then send them on their way.
Interesting.
But the BTR... Also, by the way, I just want to point out to y'all that this is ironically posted by Igor Girkin's official account. This is actually Igor Girkin's account. He's in prison right now, but all of his folks are running his account on his behalf. And so they've ended up generally becoming anti-Russian, which is probably one of the funniest and most ironic things, because Igor Girkin was like the biggest Russian supporter in the Donbass in 2014, by far. But moving on out of that and on down into the area of Kotovo, we also were able to confirm that there was a little refinery hit inside of Kotovo. Here is the fire as it was seen on the firms. Here was the refinery itself. And here is the refinery compound specifically that was hit. Now, before I get you all into the clip here in a second, because it's one hell of a clip, we do have a question for all of y'all about the Russian Foreign Ministry's statements about the possibility of ending the war in Ukraine has been exhausted. And what are y'all thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well, Matthew?
All right, so we did hear, despite the U.S. hopes for returning Russia to the negotiating table, it sounds like the Russian Foreign Ministry is dead set against that. They do not want that, and they say that the possibility of ending the war in Ukraine has been exhausted, and I'm paraphrasing that. And what happens now that Russia said that? Because they got to do something, so what are they going to do? So 49% said Russia's decided to escalate as a result of that statement, while 29% said Russia's just yapping and is basically meaningless, and 18% said Russia's trying to pressure the United States to make them give in and cave a little bit. So I think Russia's decided to escalate. I think it's already proven that they're escalating because they're flying drones over NATO territory. I think at this point it's pretty safe to say that. We still not gotten an official statement from NATO countries saying that it is 100% Russia flying it over, but I would say all signs point to Russia at this point. So in my personal conclusion, I think it's Russia. I think they're already escalating, and they're going to try to intimidate NATO to back down and keep escalating until NATO either backs down or they end up shooting down a Russian aircraft flying over NATO airspace, meaning a fighter jet that is, and then it turns into possibly a war because Russia wants to take it there. So I'm with the 49%. I think Russia's going for escalation. I don't think it's mere yapping. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say I'll be with 49%. I also believe it's escalation as well for the same reasons. And also to lay this out there to all of y'all again, because this is the running theory that I have personally on what the Russians are doing right now and what they've gamed out. Think about it this way, folks. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the Russians, which are fairly small and very worn out shoes with very bad soles. Probably like some really worn out Vans or something, I don't know. But beyond that, let's put ourselves in their shoes. And let's think from their position for a minute, from the Russian top levels, the Russian leadership like Putin. The country is dying economically. They will not survive. It doesn't matter even if they wanted a hope in hell that they're going to survive. Or the Russians, let's say we're the Russians. We are not going to survive anymore. The economy is collapsing, so the government's going to go out with the collapse. It's pretty much a guarantee at this point. So, our position is unrecoverable. We have to find a way, desperately, to turn this thing around. So, if we're going to be destroyed anyways, from a leadership perspective, if we are the Russians, say, what in the world do we have to lose if we go to war with NATO? We only have something to gain. If we lose, we lose. If everyone dies in a nuclear hellfire, the country was going out anyways, and our leadership's gone, at least by the Russians' thinking. And so, what would there be any harm in causing a war with NATO? There would be none. The only thing that could happen is that we end up actually at least fighting NATO long enough that they come up with a negotiated settlement that will lift all of the sanctions immediately, give us concessions in Ukraine, and will give us an economic chance to maybe survive. But maybe. But either way, they're generally looking down the barrel of the gun of the end for the large part of this point. So if they're going to go either way, they're going to go with the extreme chance, a possible chance, but a highly unlikely one, of turning the whole situation around by eventually going to war with NATO and forcing us into either giving them concessions or facing complete nuclear destruction, and that would be mutually assured destruction at that point. So I hope you all see what I'm getting at here with this theory, because at this point, I think that that's what the Russians are looking at, and that's why they're escalating with NATO, even when we all know, and they know, there's no chance in hell of winning a war against NATO. They know that as well, quite clearly. But they also know that this might be their only chance at getting a negotiated settlement of any type in any circumstance is this way, rather than just their nation dying off regardless of what they do. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the rest of our news in Kotovo. Because we have this little clip right here of this refinery that was burned at Kotovo. And I gotta be honest with y'all. This looks like a desert. Looks like the spice must flow. Here's the Lisan Al-Gaib. Oh my god. Bro, this place actually does look like Dune.
Yeah, I think it might have. I wonder if they filmed it in a place like that looked like this.
I honestly don't know. Like, they might have. This place looks like garbage, though. Man, anyways, moving on from Kotovo, another refinery knocked out, very sad. We also get to see up in the Lipetsk region that apparently there's been some sort of a possible MiG-31 crash. The MiG-31s, at least in the modern day, generally suck, or they carry some form of a Kinzel hypersonic, one or the other. There's apparently a possible crash that happened in Lipetsk Oblast, but we're still waiting for confirmation on that. Now, folks, it is time for us to move on into Ukraine. We finally made it, everyone. We finally made it to Ukraine. Yippee! So we're going to be getting on into the Ukraine war news and covering all that, because we do have a decent amount of frontline footage from today. Moving us down into Kyiv, first and foremost, we also got to hear that Zelensky stated, Trump did not reject Ukraine's request for Tomahawk missiles. We are going to be bringing peace to the Russians. More so, pieces, because they're going to be resting in pieces. So it appears that Zelensky is pretty hyped up about the Tomahawks. He also said that could make the Russians sober up. Which is a real play on words because, the Russians have an issue with that. But moving on from that, we also get to see that Ukrainian Mi-8 successfully took down a Russian Shahed while playing gentle guitar music. We could see the Shahed right there. They're about to hit it with a burst. Right here.
Yeah, that spotlight on it right there. Look at him. Oh, that was honestly crazy right there. That's crazy footage.
Man, that's crazy, chat. On God, chat, that's crazy. Look at it, chat. Look at it. They got the spotlight on it, chat. They got the spotlight on it, chat. They're firing at it, chat. They're firing at it. Look, the tracers, chat. It hits the drone. It blows up, chat. It goes to the ground. It burns, chat. It's on fire, chat. It's burning.
They literally followed the drone like at the exact same pace the drone was going. Someone even got confused earlier in the comments section of my video. They said, "Well, it's easy to shoot a drone down when it's sitting on the ground." It's like, well, it wasn't sitting on the ground. It was actually going the exact same speed as a helicopter. So that's why it looked like that.
Yeah, it's actually really cool that they were able to match the speed. Interestingly enough, Ukraine is using helicopters primarily for anti-drone defense these days. And what's even more interesting, folks, is that they're using a utility helicopter, the Mi-8. And let me show y'all that really quickly. This is a civilian version of the Mi-8. Let me get y'all a military version of an Mi-8. This is a military version. And what's interesting about the military variants of the Mi-8, at least some of them, is that there is a pilot, a co-pilot, and then sitting between the two of those guys is a machine gunner. And he has a machine gun. It's a basic machine gun, folks. Nothing fancy. It's not like a 30mm chain gun or anything like that. But he has a machine gun that just pokes right out of the front of the nose, and he can use that to shoot down these drones. Wildly effective, interesting enough, these helicopters can actually catch up to and then match the speed of these drones, pretty much making a stationary firing platform to pretty much pull up on a drone, sit there relatively stationary compared to that drone, and then just shoot it down. It's wildly effective, apparently, and the Ukrainians are starting to generally praise this air defense tactic and say that it's one of the best they've seen so far. But moving on from that and down into the Kursk region, we also got to see that the Ukrainian border guard was slamming the Russians in Kursk. You see an occupant, and they're about to turn him into nincompoop. And there he goes. He's gone. Another one is gone.
I think the Ukrainians are redrawing the borders or something, because this doesn't look like the Ukrainian border to me. This looks like the interior of the country.
Whoa, I mean, it looks like they're building out. Whoa, that's like crazy.
Soldiers without borders.
Man, that's like it's like doctors. Like, man, it's like some other organization. But I think they're like completely opposite. But moving on from that and on into our clips down in the location unknowns, we only have two. We did get to see that the Ukrainians are now introducing a new way to die on the battlefield: death by Steam Deck. That's right, everyone. You too, if you're a Russian, can get some lead flung your way by a Ukrainian firing an M250 caliber using a Steam Deck. Never seen innovation like this in my life, but it actually works.
It is crazy, honestly. Completely remote controlled.
Man, not only can you play Mario Smash Brothers, you can also fire a 50 cal with a Steam Deck. It's crazy, folks. The innovation out here.
Is it able to be turned and everything, or not?
Oh yeah, it's able to be turned.
Like from the remote control, because I didn't see any way for it to really turn.
Oh yeah, it can be turned. Like you can see right there. the traverse mechanism, or at least the shield for the traverse mechanism.
Oh, that's very interesting right there. That's actually a pretty interesting design they got.
Yeah,
It's just how do you reload the thing though? Don't you have to reload it pretty often?
That's the trick. You don't because basically what this is, it's not really supposed to be like an autonomous one-man soldier. It's just a firepower multiplier. So you put this off in a position to give you an intersecting lane of fire for your squad, and then when the Russians pull up, this thing gives you at that most critical moment of the battle an intersecting lane of fire. So you pretty much got them in a kill zone at that point. That will force the Russians to back off or get pinned down by suppressing fire. At that point, you control the battle so well, you could pretty much get up and probably walk over to this thing and reload it, because the Russians will be pinned down most likely by then.
Interesting. Now imagine if they put this platform on a mobile moving platform. That would be a hell of a thing then.
Oh, that would be crazy. I bet you they're working on that right now, actually. But we also saw the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours. And, oh, buddy, folks, it was good. No Bobcats, unfortunately. Aww, I know everyone's very sad. But beyond that, Miss DC Keeper of the record stated that 328 drones is the 22nd highest daily loss, and another troop loss day over 1,000. And that is quite good indeed, as we were able to see that over the past 24 hours, 1,020 Russian soldiers got their ticket, while another APC was destroyed, along with 55 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 15 artillery pieces, and 328 drones. In general, it was actually a pretty good day today, and we also were able to see that across the whole of the front lines. It was a real good day today, so let me move y'all down in there and show y'all piece by piece. Moving us into the Severonsky Forest, we did get to see the 63rd Brigade taking its time, hitting some Russians within the area. They took out a house. And another.
Jeez, man, they took the whole walls, roof, and everything down with that one.
Man, it's called the 63rd Brigade a moving crew because they take your house and move it everywhere where it was or wasn't. Look, they even took out this one. It didn't even have a roof.
Seems like the ones with the roofs, they go down harder. It seems like it contains more of the explosion.
You know,
like that one.
Man, let me take another approach to that. You like Whataburger? You like Burger King? Well, let me tell you something. Those Russian drones, you like your house? Well, they can take down your house. They can take down all kinds of houses.
Yo, that's your most L take, bro. Like, that's an L take.
They could take down all kinds of houses. They could take down, they could take down your house. They could take down Jimmy's house. They could take down anyone's house. And we see them continuing to just absolutely hammer the Russians in the Severonsky Forest. Oh, wow, that one, like, blasted through the ceiling. That was actually pretty cool. This one also went into a nook and cranny. And to turn it more so into a nook without the cranny. You know, I just saw 2 days ago on, say, Three Little Pigs. I gotta be honest with you, I would pay good money to hear Netanyahu in his voice say the Three Little Pig story. Little pig, let me in. That would be funny as hell, honestly. Like, that actually would be hilarious. That'd be like a dub take, bro. But we can also see them hitting that position right there as well.
Would you like to be one of the Three Little Pigs in the story?
Bro, that was Bibby when he was going on his rampage in Doha. He said, little piggy, let me in, fire. Like, it's like, bro, chill. But anyways, moving on from that and down to Bakhmut, we also got to see a Russian command post getting hit by GBU-62s.
Man, I remember that OG Three Little Piggies cartoon. They had the wolf dressing up as the grandma showing up at the door and stuff like that. Talking about, let me in. And they said, who's there? It's like, honestly, those original ones were wild. They were so wild, they had to edit them a little bit.
Yeah, when you're speaking of that grandma, I was like, I think that was different when we saw it on TV. Yeah, when we had the DVD version back in the day, folks, that was actually a totally different character in that short. And I'm not even going to mention what kind. But moving on from that, and further on down from the Bakhmut area, that command post is definitely gone. And we also saw down near the Rusin Yar area, the Russians pulling out their usual sick tricks. They blew up a pipeline in the area, which is now releasing a toxic shield of gas for the large part, which the Ukrainians are saying the Russians did this to try and stop a Ukrainian advance in this area, which seems to be plausible. But you can see here the pipeline is just emitting this toxic white field of gas. It's impossible to pass through. You'll suffocate and die, and also the fumes are toxic.
How toxic are we talking here?
Like real toxic. Like if you walk through this, you're gonna be like those Russians that wandered through that pipeline that one time.
Oh yeah, I don't want to be in the pipeline.
Man, you do not want to be in that pipeline, I tell you, man. But moving on from that, we also get to see the 55th Artillery Brigade hitting targets in Pokrovsk. Speaking of targets, everyone, I hope that the U.S. GDP has hit its target for this year. I'm sure that AI does not account for all of our GDP growth except for 0.1% over the whole annual year, at least at this point. I'd hope not. I don't think that'd be the case, right, folks? I don't think so. But we can see here that the Russians are getting theirs at this point. This guy's running into a house. And the Ukrainians said, "Where's your proof of renter's insurance?" And they're about to teach him. They're about to teach him. That's why you take out a big claim, folks, or at least start out with a large claim. But that's the end of the clip. And moving on from that, and on out of that little bit of business, we also got to see down in the Donetsk area some Ukrainian drones flying over. Look at that. That's a Lyuti.
Летит пидорас нахуй, охуеть, блядь.
Where did it go?
What the hell?
Bro, he was like the Cookie Monster. But where did that drone go, Matty? Where did it go?
I don't know. It went off into the wild blue yonder.
It went down to Matviv Kurgan. What happened in Matviv Kurgan today, everyone? All kinds of fun things. Let's find out. Together. Oh, they're looking around. They can hear it. Oh, there's no audio on this one.
Over yonder. Look.
Look down the under. There it is. It's the same damn Lyuti.
Look. Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga, blade. Man. And where's it going? Oh, it looks like he's diving. What could it be diving on? Probably nothing. There it goes, over the horizon.
Oh, no. That looks like an oil depot.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Like that Family Guy character. Yeah, they hit an oil depot down in the middle of Matviv, Morgan, or whatever the hell the name of the town was. Matviv Kurgan. There you go. That sounds like some Klingon name, like for a planet. Like, we're going to Matviv Kurgan 4 or some shit like that. But anyways, moving on from that, and on past that area and towards the direction of the Velika Novosilka front, we also get to see the Ukrainians whipping out a little supply run. Oh, and we can hear that drum and bass starting up there. We'll have to mute that. But the Ukrainians are on their way on their supply run, and it was one hell of a supply run. They did make it, though.
Right, you could literally see that munition, like, right before it actually exploded.
Man, it's crazy, Blade, honestly. And these guys
That's crazy, though. It didn't really affect them at all. They sort of kept driving like it was just like a pothole.
Yeah, honestly, these guys are, like, thugging it out. They don't have any armor on this car. It's just a normal car. These guys aren't, though. They are in an armored car, so they're a lot safer. But this guy just whipped out the sickest dodge I've ever seen. He saw it coming. Watch this, folks. Skirt! And the drone flew right past like a cartoon, blowing up behind them and leaving them safe. Very lucky for him.
Man, some people say these guys might be like Thug Shaker Central or something out here. They're actually just, they're really going hard out here on these streets.
Meanwhile, in Shaker Central, man, that was hard to say. I got government secrets. And they're like, come out with your hands up. Like, no, I got government secrets. Oh, man. And it was just the easiest. Oh, that one actually hit. But it didn't really do anything. Oh, actually, it did send some sparks flying around.
A little bit of sparks. They call him Sparky. Oh, I heard his ears too.
I bet you that was loud as hell. I'm sure.
Yeah, I bet. Probably just like did a number on those eardrums. Kind of like that video earlier did on mine.
Yeah, honestly. Also, by the way, folks, these videos here are not from any battlefield action. This is what the Ukrainian armed forces are having to go through just to get supplies up to the fighting men on the front. So this is what they're going through just to get supplies up there to them these days. Quite a tough and arduous sort of a task. But moving on from that, and on out of that little bit of news, and on down to Velika Novosilka itself, we did get to see the Russians, the Ukrainians returning the favor to the Russians by giving them some free eggs. Take a look at that one. They dropped an egg free on the Russians. Oh, and here comes another one. And in case they weren't happy with the first one, here's the second one. There's always room for seconds. And I mean, they're just absolutely slamming them, folks. You can just see it here in the 2 different camera views. It's looking good. And I mean, that thing be cooking swell. But moving on from that, and on out of the area of Velika Novosilka, we're moving down to Feodosia because update, it's still burning. The oil platforms in Feodosia are still on fire, and this entire tank melted from the heat. It does prove, folks, that jet fuel melts steel. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Do you think it was more of an implosion though? Like it seemed like it might have imploded.
But this thing squashed in on itself like a pudding. If it was an explosion, it would have blown outwards in most directions.
Oh no, an implosion, I'm saying.
Oh no. This thing actually did, like, it had a puncture on the side which allowed for the fuel to leak, but the heat of it alone actually warped the steel that it's made of and allowed it to continue to crumple on itself.
Are they spraying oil on that? They were spraying water on that oil fire. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, they're spraying water on it, man.
Man, honestly, I wouldn't doubt the Russians spray oil on a water fire. I mean, that would be something the Russians would do.
I would have to be honest with you. Seems like something very Russian of them. And also, by the way, folks, I just want to clarify this really quickly because some people are like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? 9/11? So I'll say this really quickly. The towers did normally collapse. Like, I'm not into conspiracy theories on that because a lot of people who talk about jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams, they're right, yes. But those same people don't factor in that high temperatures like jet fuel are hot enough to start tempering the steel and also cause its metallurgical properties to weaken. It makes steel brittle. And considering that some of those steel beams were having to support additional weight due to the damage caused to the building and also the brittleness being caused because of the larger hot fire, it doesn't take the steel beams melting to collapse the building. It just takes the steel beams becoming brittle due to prolonged exposure to high temperatures to lead to a collapse, also due to the compromised state of the structure when that happened. A lot of people don't really get that. For some reason, a lot of people think that steel is 100% strength until it melts. And if you know anything about smithing or anything to do with metallurgy, everyone would know that that's certainly not the case. Iron and steel becomes a lot more malleable and a lot more susceptible to pressure the hotter it gets. So it doesn't take you melting steel to make a structure collapse. It just takes the steel getting to a high temperature and becoming brittle, or the metallurgy being compromised due to that reheating, which could lead to a collapse. But I hope that does address that well. A little interesting fact about that whole sort of a deal. But moving on from that and on into the last bit of news that we have inside of Ukraine, it's time for us, folks, to get on into the speech by President Volodymyr Zelensky of day 1324 of the war. So, without further ado, why in the world are these playing us? Here is the speech. Peach!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Головне про сьогодні. Військові питання дуже детально обговорили з військовим командуванням застосування нашої далекобійної зброї. Застосування наших ракет, застосування наших дронів, деякі речі, що стосуються виробництва, постачання в армію, тренування наших екіпажів. Завдання зараз бути значно активнішими у всьому, що стосується підготовки та виконання далекобійних санкцій проти Росії. Чим більш результативною Україна буде в далекобійності, тим швидше ми зможемо досягти миру. Українська далекобійна зброя стає відчутно якісніше. Ми постійно для цього працюємо. І вже надали багато різних можливостей саме для виробництва. Необхідні фінанси, всю необхідну підтримку. Треба так само відчутно масштабувати застосування. Маємо чіткі плани щодо цього на найближчі місяці. Все повинно бути реалізовано. Українську влучність вже видно, має бути більше. Це абсолютно справедливо, що Україна завдає ударів у відповідь. Точкових ударів. І на відміну від Росії, ми знаємо, чого хочемо досягти. Безперечно, миру. Ми не ведемо війну заради війни, як це робить Росія. І вже навіть Хамас проявляє договороспроможність, але не Путін. Поки що. Ми разом з партнерами створюємо умови для примусу Росії до миру. І це буде. Ми підтримуємо всі глобальні дипломатичні зусилля заради миру на Близькому Сході і дуже розраховуємо, що справедливий тиск на Росію призведе до миру і для України, і для усього нашого регіону. Важливо, щоб лідерство Сполучених Штатів Америки працювало і надалі. Провів сьогодні нараду з міністром закордонних справ України та дипломатичною командою Офісу щодо проєктів наших резолюцій, наших документів в міжнародних організаціях, які мають бути ухвалені ще в цьому році. Я доручив залучити партнерів максимально, саме провідних партнерів, щоб і надалі була глобальна підтримка наших ініціатив. Це стосується, зокрема, таких дуже чутливих питань, як повернення українських полонених, усіх, які утримуються в Росії. І ми знаємо про людей, які ще з 2014 року в полоні. Також це стосується викрадених Росією дітей. Час спливає надто швидко. І не те, що кожен рік, кожен місяць має значення для кожної дитини, яка розлучена із сім'єю та з рідними своїми середовищем, з Україною. Ми знаємо багато про абсолютно тоталітарні програми перевиховання дітей в Росії таким чином, щоб вони були налаштовані воювати. І навіть проти справжньої батьківщини, проти свого справжнього дому. Тисячі таких українських дітей на окупованій території та в Росії. Я дякую усім, хто працює разом з нами, щоб повернути їх додому. Це різні країни, від Канади до Катару, які нам допомагають. У нашій коаліції з повернення наших українських дітей вже більше, ніж 40 країн, плюс Євросоюз, плюс Рада Європи. І важливо, щоб були результати спільної роботи. Також на завтра призначив нараду щодо аудиту всіх наших домовленостей з партнерами за цей рік. Що досягнуто, що реалізовано і що має бути реалізовано. Українська зовнішня політика цими роками значно активніше, ніж будь-коли. І треба, щоб кожна наша зустріч, кожна наша домовленість давали справжній результат для України. Щоб все, про що ми домовились з лідерами, реально виконувалось на рівні наших команд. За підсумками такого зовнішньополітичного аудиту будуть відповідні висновки та доручення на 3 наступні місяці. Зброя для України, фінанси, підтримка енергетики, всі форми тиску на Росію та перемовний трек. Це ключові напрямки. Уряд, Міністерство закордонних справ, Міністерство оборони, Офіс, РНБО, по кожній інституції я очікую доповідь. Сьогодні також провів нараду з прем'єр-міністром України, міністром енергетики, керівником НАК «Нафтогазу» щодо головних питань нашої підготовки до зими, а також, звісно, відновлення в областях після російських ударів. Фактично щоранку нові завдання для наших енергетиків, для ремонтних бригад. Російські удари не припиняються. Саме цивільна інфраструктура, енергетична інфраструктура для росіян – головні мішені. Ми будемо протидіємо. І важливо, що партнери готові нам допомагати. Визначили, з ким контактувати і що саме має бути досягнуто найближчими тижнями. Внутрішню роботу на рівні громад, на рівні областей теж доведеться всім виконувати. Інакше будуть висновки по керівникам. Слава Україні!
And Herom Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, here on this day of 1324 of the war And it's time for us folks to get on into the rest of the show for the night, which is probably one of the most enjoyable parts because it's kind of like a freestyle. We get to talk to each and every one of y'all, and we get to talk about anything and everything except for religion, politics, climate change, or whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare. That one can certainly not be touched. But we can talk about everything else, anything and everything. What do y'all want to talk about? It's on the table. You want to talk about tables? It's on the table. Well, actually, it's not because it's the table, but y'all want to talk about it?
You want to talk about freestyles? Years ago, they tried to.
Years ago,
they tried to put me in
the. Man, I tell you, it is going to be a fun segment. It's going to be a fun one because we get to do anything here, anything at all. This is where all the voices come out. This is where we get to talk about all kinds of interesting stuff. And of course, a lot of people are still talking about the towers. And also, I wanted to,
I don't like this topic. I don't like it.
well, you know, it's perfectly fine to talk about, you know.
I don't know. It seems like a little sketchy topic here. I don't know if I get too deep into this one.
Well, I mean, like I would because you know it's supporting the existent theory because it's a real one. Jet fuel burns at 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, and if y'all know anything about blacksmithing, y'all actually know that at those sorts of temperatures, steel gets hot enough that it turns bright red. Now, generally in smithing, the best sort of a color for malleable steel to use in smithing would be a straw color at 2500 degrees Fahrenheit. But at 1500 degrees, smithing is still possible. That's actually the standard industrial temperature that most steel is heated into, so that way a power hammer can actually forge the steel into something else, like a sheet or a coil. That's fairly common. And so what a lot of people don't like, so many people miss this with the conspiracy theory, and this is why like I don't even understand it. With jet fuel burning in a building at 1500 degrees, and it's in all of the support structures or the external walls of the building itself by the design with a very light core, because the World Trade Center was special in that way. With that fuel temperature burning around the entire periphery of several floors within that area and heating up all of the steel beams to a brighter red color, it doesn't even have to cool down and become brittle to lead to a collapse. That temperature alone is enough to start causing those steel beams to warp. It doesn't have to melt, but it's enough to warp them. And that in itself will lead to a complete and total collapse of the structure. If you go and look at any of the footage from that day, you'll actually see that when the South Tower collapsed, it, like so many people say, it collapsed straight down. It didn't. You'll actually see that the top of the building canted over, I believe it was towards the west, and then collapsed straight downwards. So it was not clean like a whole bunch of conspiracy theorists make it out to be. It was definitely a collapse due to the heat stress on the main support pillars of the external walls of the building. So, you know, like I get that a lot of people don't want to trust the government, but there are plenty of real things that you can come up with to not trust the government about. Trying to blame that on the government doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, you could say that they weren't on the ball and didn't catch them in time. That's definitely an argument to be made. But saying that they demolished the buildings as a false flag wouldn't really make too much sense. At least to me, because there's definitely clear and evident proof that kind of temperature on a steel beam would cause it to become malleable and warp under an amount of weight to be on a steel beam that's burning red hot. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses it well, at least the best I can. You know, you don't have to melt a steel beam to make it malleable to where it will lead to a structural collapse. But anyways, with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into the rest of this segment. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so moving on from that and moving on back into our super chats and live chat questions and everything else as well. It's time to jump into our live chats and super chats right now. So our first super chat is going to go to Mr. Glock, who's there, LSA. He puts in a $50 support, and thank you very much, good sir, for the third largest support of the night. And we do appreciate that very much, and also we appreciate you being a long-time channel viewer as well. He said, tomahawks or not? Does he love me or love me not? LSA, Glock, who's there? LSA who? LSA, who has the best YouTube channel?
And it's not us. I'm just kidding, by the way. It certainly is us. We're just the greatest at this. Some people have said that we're better than anyone else who's ever been on television or YouTube, for that matter. We're better than all the big names, you know, like Walter Cronkite and Johnny Carson and Rodney Dangerfield. We're just the greatest people alive. I'm just kidding. We're okay at what we do. We're great at delivering the news. Jokes, though, they do miss from here and there. I just hope that we don't point that out too much when it happens. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't have been able to make this channel possible and keep it running. So that way folks like you could say that this is the best channel on YouTube. Do I think it's the best? I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, we're definitely great at what we do, covering news. But as far as production quality, I mean, there are a lot of YouTube channels out there who will put together a really good documentary. And I'll be honest with you all, folks, I know that we're really good at what we do in this category, but I still cannot shake that I look up to the documentary folks who make, like, the 40-minute long documentaries that are well produced and well edited, and they have animations and all that. I still look at that as a gold standard. I hope one day we can make a channel, like a side channel, that can do something like that, because I would absolutely love to get in that sort of content creation. It's something that's actually really tough from a business side of things, but I like it. I think it's really cool, and I like that they explore niche topics that you would never see on television. So I thank you so much for the support, but there is always room for improvement. Glock, who's there, LSA. But I got to thank you so much for the kind words and supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, so that way we can always work towards eventual improvement and try and make this show and this channel even better than before. So an amazing, huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Luis Gilberto. And thank you very much, Luis, for that $20 support as well. And we appreciate that very, very much. And Luis said, probably lagging due to the lack of power from Zaporizhia and LSA.
Maybe, maybe, but I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep running, and that's an interesting idea right there. That's a really interesting one. You know, we could have blamed it on that. Someone asked me if I blamed it on the Russians, and I was like, you know what, we should have. Like, we should have. It would have been definitely untrue, but we should have anyways. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 20 from Robert Krogan. And thank you very much, Robert, as well, for that support. He said, patience is a virtue. And I think he put that in last night, actually. Last night, patience got us nowhere, actually. We were patient as hell with that problem, and it got us nowhere. So we had to spend like an hour after the fact. We actually didn't spend an hour weeping, by the way. We spent an hour investigating, looking through the network logs, looking through the settings, looking through everything. We were looking for anything that could have led to that problem. And we literally tried everything. Speed testing. We tried troubleshooting from the YouTube dashboard. We tried everything. And then we realized, oh wait, it's not a problem on our end. It's a problem on someone else's end. And then we were like, okay, there's nothing we can do about that, sadly. So patience is a virtue sometimes. I will agree. But Enforcer, what say you?
Patience certainly is a virtue, folks. It's a great and wonderful virtue to have. One that some people don't have, one that some people have, and one that some people have in a great abundance. And I got to tell y'all that I was freaking out last night. I was racing to try and figure out what was wrong, and 20 minutes later, after we had both been trying to troubleshoot, we tried to run one again, and then it failed. And then I sat back here, and like literally, folks, I went through everything on my computer, and because one of the first thoughts, or one of the first theories, was that it was my computer, because it's always my computer. So I went through and was updating everything, searching everything. I started looking at updating drivers, so on and so forth, updated everything I could. And I was like, okay, this has got to fix the problem. And then we did a whole bunch of other stuff. I can't get into that. But we did a whole bunch of other stuff. We were like, okay, let's try it again. And I had actually run a test stream that was private, and it worked just fine. And I was like, okay, it looks like we're good. And then that's when I was like, okay, I think we fixed it. Whatever we did, we fixed it, so we're good. We ran a second one, and then it failed as well. And so then we just ended that one as quickly as we could. And then we got back to crunching it out and trying to figure out what was wrong. And then we came to the conclusion it wasn't even anything within our control that we could have fixed. It was something outside of our control that we can't get into. But beyond that, however, I would have to say a big thanks to you for the support and wanting us to have patience, because it helped us out a little bit last night, hopefully. But a big thanks to you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And so with that, big thanks to you so much once again, and we're moving on to the next one.
All right, so our next one goes to Danny B, and thank you very much, Danny, as well, for that $49 support right there, a 49, and thank you very much, Danny, once again. He said, "Good evening, enforcers. Chef Danny here, and it was a
Hey!
bummer about last night, and I agree with you." He said, "But I instead ended up watching a documentary about the super guppy." Honestly, I felt like a super guppy out of water last night after that stream messed up, because we had prepared for literally the entire show. The polls, the titles, the thumbnails, all the news, all the talking points, and all the research. And then for just to go poof like that was a bummer, to say the least. But that's interesting, by the way. The super guppy. I think that was a plane, I think.
You think? My boy, it was the plane, the Super Guppy.
Oh, look, it's like the precursor to the beluga.
Yeah, kinda. It's kind of the precursor to all heavy lift aircraft, like the Dream Lifter, which is kind of like the Super Guppy, but even better.
Le guppy. Honestly, that's like a antithesis. This thing's no guppy. This thing's huge.
Man, this thing's let's see, what the hell would we call it? This thing's lechonky. Like, man, this thing's lechonk.
This thing's a little fatty.
Oh man, we got whoa. I mean, I think Boeing's dropping its physical fitness standards because that's a fatty. I mean, it might not be Captain Sullivan on the Hudson, but whoa, look at that boiler. but beyond that, the Super Guppy is really cool because it was actually NASA's heavy lift craft or aircraft for a very long amount of time. I think it still might be. Yeah, actually it still is. And it was developed from the Stratocruiser, which is an American airliner that's really not even remembered these days. The only thing that came out of it, kind of, was the Super Guppy, which is what a lot more people would remember. But we made this thing to carry around our stuff. And it did pretty well, actually. It did incredibly well. You can actually see it here carrying back the Apollo 11 command module back to Ellington Air Force Base. It was very versatile. And also, the whole front of the aircraft would swing open. The whole thing, even the cockpit, would detach and swing wide open, which is a pretty cool feature of these sort of heavy lift aircraft. The Airbus company actually, well, the Boeing company evolved this into the Dream Lifter. The Airbus company has the Airbus Beluga, which is their version of a Super Guppy. This is really a Super Guppy in the modern sense. It looks like a Super Guppy. But I believe...
The weird thing is, from what I've gathered in the documentaries I've seen about these large heavy lifters like this, especially the Airbus Beluga, is the weird thing is they actually use it to build other Airbus planes. Like, they use it to transport wings and large parts of the actual other Airbus models that they actually produce to different parts of the production assembly process, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's like a special equipment variety of aircraft, kind of like how there's special equipment like on the railroads or for ships that also do these sorts of jobs as well. This is like in a flying sense, this is a lot like a mobile floating dry dock in a sense. It can take something from one place to another and help with the assembly or repair of anything in the world. It's very interesting how these aircraft operate. And
It is interesting. It's really fascinating that the closest human equivalent to an aircraft of this size is probably maybe the leader of North Korea, maybe possibly. But this thing right here, it's a lot smoother when it lands. It doesn't bounce. It just kind of like, glides down. A nice butter landing, even though this thing's massive right here. But I tell you what, this thing's got some chunk to it. I mean, it's a huge thing. Honestly, it's kind of ugly, but it works.
I would say it's graceful. Actually, it's graceful. We saw this thing once, Matthew. If you don't remember, we saw it in Mobile, Alabama. Do you remember that way back in the day?
I think the memory cells have left me.
We saw it, folks. The Beluga. It was over Mobile, Alabama, which is the last place you would expect to see a Beluga. But the reason why I was here is because there's actually an Airbus aircraft assembly line in Mobile, Alabama. And I don't know what type of aircraft they produce out of that Airbus facility. Let me see here. I think it's down here. Yeah. Where in the hell is it? Where is it, damn it? Where in the world is this thing, folks? Where the hell? Let's see. I don't know. I've lost it. Let me just type in Airbus. Airbus. Final assembly line. Oh my God, it was right here, everyone. It was right here at the first airport I went to. Who would have thunk? But beyond that, they build Airbus aircraft here. And so every once in a while, the Beluga comes by and it takes a visit. And one time, we were in the back of a car driving through, and the Beluga came over. And it was like seeing Rosie O'Donnell gliding through the sky. It was a truly amazing and fantastic sort of a deal. It's like the moment, like when they say, folks, that pigs fly, and it was a really incredible sort of a thing. You wouldn't believe that something like that could fly, but it can. And it's like, wow, that is so neat. So I was just absolutely enthralled by that. I still remember that to this day. Because it was a bright, sunny day out. It was very cloudy, and that thing looked actually quite graceful up there, kind of flying on in. It was like a large airship or something, but. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed that little side story about the Airbus Beluga. I've never seen the Dreamlifter, nor have I ever seen a Super Guppy, but I wish that I could. I would love to see a Super Guppy myself one day, and I think there is... Actually, yeah, they do have a preserved one at the Pima Air and Space Museum, so you actually still can see a Super Guppy from NASA service, which it's out there in Pima, in Arizona, I believe. But beyond that, I do thank you massively for support, Danny B. And I have to say, you spent that time well watching that. And oh my God, Airbus actually got one of these to start off.
Oh wow, a Skylink too. That's that thing's phew. I tell you what.
I'm not gonna lie, man. This thing in that chrome color, that it's busted looking.
This thing's got some very odd dimensions to it.
Whoa, I mean, look at that boiler.
That sounds so sauce like the way I said that. Like it came out really sauce the way I said it. It had like a second meaning to it. But I didn't mean it like that. I meant like literally what I said.
Man, and let's see. Oh, they had the mini guppy, which is this one, and then they had le pregnant guppy, which I don't really know why this one was the pregnant guppy, because it kind of looks just like the super guppy. It's like what it's like, why in the world is that? Like, I know that it's slightly different, but why? Like how? I completely forgot that. But anyways, enough of that, folks. I hope that does address that somewhat well. And also, Danny B, I thank you for the support and also bringing up a really interesting aircraft. There is one like this that was actually in U.S. Air Force service. Matthew, have you ever heard of the C-119 flying boxcar?
I have heard of this one, believe it or not. I have heard of this one.
He has heard of this one, folks. All right, well, moving on.
I've heard of this one. Listen, I've heard of it. I've heard
Breaking
of this one.
news!
I've heard of it.
Breaking! Like, he's heard of it. But beyond that, this thing is really cool, folks, because it had a cargo bay back here in the back. But it was a twin-boomed aircraft. It was a cargo aircraft that had a twin-boomed tail system to it, which is really unique for this sort of a size of an aircraft. Let me see if I can show y'all one over in Vietnam. Actually, this is a flying boxcar gunship. Who would have ever thought? It's like, I never even knew of that. But damn, I'm trying to see here. Oh yeah, they used them in Korea. You know, if you didn't know, I didn't know that either. I just remember them being used in Vietnam. Where in the hell are the ones being used in Vietnam, huh? Where are they? Yeah, see, look, the Republic of Vietnam's Air Force had 91 of them. Where in the hell are the pictures of them? Where are they? Where are they, Winslow? Where in the world are they? Oh my God, like, I built up the whole story around Vietnam, and I was like, there's no pictures to show y'all that. What the hell are they doing to me? They just trying to screw me around here? Are they trying to screw me over where I can't show y'all a picture?
Fairchild. That's the one of the companies before. Did it become Fairchild Republic? Was it a merger or was it always Fairchild Republic?
It became a merger.
Interesting. Yeah, they made a aircraft here that we shalln't speak of. You know, Fairchild Republic and the nice titanium bathtub. We shall not speak of
Don't
such a
bring
bathtub.
it up. Oh God! Everyone's gonna start killing each other over whether it's relevant or not. They're gonna go feral. Oh my God. But you know, actually, funny story for everyone. There was another big company. Well, if I can get through the stuttering, that used to exist here in America called McDonnell Douglas. Y'all see that little emblem right there with the rocket in the wing? Guess what, folks? Boeing still has it. Because Boeing is actually a merger of McDonnell Douglas and Boeing. And for a while, it was actually known as Boeing McDonnell Douglas. But eventually, they dropped the McDonnell Douglas part because Boeing pretty much absorbed it in after the merger, and it just became Boeing. But they actually kept around a stylized version of the McDonnell Douglas logo.
Very interesting. It's kind of interesting to follow the like consolidation of defense companies in the United States. It basically consolidated down to five final versions of major defense contractors. So many different smaller companies got absorbed that used to exist, and it happened just recently too. It's not something that's been a long-term thing. It just happened, I think, in the last 20 or 30 years. It happened, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's actually like that in every single category in America. Back in the day, folks, did y'all know how? Let me type this up. Class 1 railroads. I got to bring it back to trains because this happened in the railroading world. Class 1 railroads number. Let's see. Class 1 railroad number. Numbers every year. Let me show you this because this is something that I always find quite fascinating, folks. And it looks like, oh, damn, they don't have one that amalgamates it all. Back in the day, back in the 80s, like back in 1980 when the Staggers Act came into effect, I think there was something like 40-something Class 1 railroads inside of the United States. Now, I think there's only 5. Back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s, I think there was a couple of dozen defense companies. Now there's basically 5. It's a little bit interesting, folks, how that works, because in almost every single industry, if you look at them, there used to be dozens of them, and now there will only be about a handful. There's about so many of them, at least major companies like the big head honchos, you can count them on one hand. And
And
it's
you know what's odd? You know what's odd is that they've consolidated, and also the regulations around defense contracting has gotten so strict that it's nearly impossible or extremely difficult to get past the barriers of entry to become a defense contractor. Now it is extremely difficult, and it used to not be like that. So it's interesting. Consolidation occurred. We had consolidation to just about basically 5 major defense players, and then a restriction of huge regulation around it to basically encapsulate it in a big bubble. So honestly, that doesn't sound very American to me, to be perfectly honest. And also on top of that, it's not good for innovation because when you have less companies competing, you don't have a bunch of agility with smaller companies trying to break through like you have in other countries. Like, for example, Ukraine currently has a war under their butts, so that's making them really go, really fast with innovation. But they also have a wider industrial base too, and a much more competition as well to push that innovation forward. So they really have basically locked the industry, not one company in specific, just the whole thing as in general has been locked into where it's at now, which is really a shame.
It really is a shame, and it's a lot like that in every industry, folks. Like in the grocery industry, in the online retail industry, in the railroad industry, in the shipping industry, in the airline industry. You know how many airlines there used to be in this country, folks? Dozens. You know how many of them there are now? I think it's down to about a handful, about 5 major airlines or so. I think it's actually less. I think for the airlines, it would be Delta, American Airlines, United, and I think there's one more that I'm not thinking of, Matthew. Or it might just be those 3, actually, at this point.
Possibly, I'm not really sure.
But then you also have the budget airlines, but those aren't like the big airlines that are competitive internationally. You have Spirit, rest in pieces. You also have Frontier and a couple of others that operate as a smaller sort of a budget deal, but they don't control fortress hubs like the major airlines do, and they also aren't competitive like the major fortress airlines are. Actually, it's Southwest. It's Southwest that's the other one. Like they're the only one that's around that's from the budget category that's a major airline, really. And that's also why they're not going dead right now like all the other budget airlines, because the whole budget thing kind of has already run its course again like it did before a couple of decades ago. So that's why Spirit went bankrupt. And there's also, I think, I'm hearing, folks, that another budget airline is about to be declaring bankruptcy here in the near future, also due to the same sort of economic reasons. But a little bit interesting with that. But beyond that, enough of pointing out how America is kind of monopolized over the past few decades. But one thing I have to say, folks, before we move on, though, just one thing. I'm not trying to get political here, folks, but I think we can all kind of agree that some antitrust actions probably would be beneficial at this point for increased competition and also for breaking things up so that way some up-and-coming starts can get a good head run at the whole thing instead of running headlong into a brick wall. I don't really think that's political. I think everyone can kind of agree with that at this point. But, that's my 2 cents on it. Anyways, with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support, Danny B. And I don't know how we went from a super guppy to talking about monopolies, but with that, we're we're on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat here. This one also goes to Bobby43 yet again, and he puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Bobby, for the third super chat between last night and tonight as well, and we appreciate that. He said the Super Guppy is a plane with child, LOL. Honestly, it kind of looks like it. They even said pregnant guppy or whatever on that other one over there, which is kind of an interesting thing. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of that Little Johnny Jet cartoon they used to have back in the day. If anybody remembers that one, pull that up, Jamie. Pull that up real quick. Little Johnny Jet, and show that right there.
I don't think we can. It's actually a Warner Brothers thing, so it's going to be a little copyrighted.
We can't even show a picture of it.
We might, but you know,
we won't risk it then. We won't risk it. But the Little Johnny Jet thing, it had the father jet, the mother jet, and the baby jet, and it was like a whole thing. And it was like a 1960s or 1953 cartoon or something like that. So very, very cool. But yes, that's kind of like it right there. It was the whole plane and children thing.
Hold up, I can give one line from that cartoon, and everyone will know what we're talking about. The Air Force is awarding you with a contract for 5,000 jets. 5,000. Like, bro, you know,
Mary.
Man, that's exactly it. That is exactly it, Mary. But beyond that, a big thanks to you for the support. And I would have to agree. I'd have to honestly agree with you, Bobby. It does look like it's a plane with child. It kind of is. It kind of is, actually, because if you look at them, they actually did carry around some, like, aircraft fuselages from time to time. So it kind of was, actually. It would birth aircraft, not in that sort of a, like, direct sense, but in a literal sense. Not in a literal sense. Look, Jack, you got the Super Guppy, and back when in the day when this thing used to fly, there was McDonnell Douglas. And McDonnell Douglas was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys. They had the 24-hour decompressions and the endless crashes with the DC-10s. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Are you good? Are you good? Did you get a flight? Are you all right? First class? Allegheny Airlines? Look! You gotta understand. It's critical. It's critical to understand the Super Guppy. If a child asks, where did baby come from? Oh, the man on the moon. Elton John. You gotta tell him. You gotta tell him straight. We're busted. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figman, and he puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Sarge, for that $20 support. He said, I wanted to say thank you, LSA, for all the condolences for the loss of our family members in a drone strike in Kherson, Ukraine. And also my condolences to you once again, Sarge, for that. He said, I love this community and its leadership, and you all have brought some light back into our lives.
And I got to say, LSA Sergeant Pigman, it's incredibly unfortunate to hear. Actually, folks, I was not really wanting to disclose that. I wasn't really sure if LSA Sergeant Pigman would be okay with me disclosing that. But unfortunately, one of LSA Sergeant Figman's uncles actually died, along with several others, during the barrage on the city of Kherson, which occurred yesterday. There was actually a decent amount of casualties and fatalities that were reported from around the city, but in that particular instance, a car that his uncle was riding in was actually directly attacked by a Russian FPV drone, killing 2 and leaving 1 critically wounded, and I think that person unfortunately passed later as well in the hospital in Kherson. I gotta say, it's an incredibly unfortunate thing to hear about LSA Sergeant Figman, and I do have to say that my condolences are with y'all, and I hope that while the loss of a family member is incredibly unfortunate and hard on folks, I hope y'all are still taking it the best y'all can nonetheless, and hopefully it'll be a bit of a reminder to everyone that it's always good to try and stick together and enjoy people's time when they're around, because it might be their last time, even in these sorts of unfortunate circumstances. But I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you, though, for the support, LSA Sergeant Figman, and I'm glad to know that the Lee Spring Army has been sending its condolences to you in this incredibly unfortunate time. But a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Numerian, who puts in a 20. And thank you, Numerian, as well, for that support and also supporting our work here on YouTube as well. He said that, surprisingly, Turkey backed the Israel-Gaza peace deal, even if rather grudgingly. And do you think they'll back NATO when war truly kicks off, or just stand back and let everyone else fight?
I think Turkey will back it up. I think they will, because Turkey really doesn't have a choice. The Russians would eat them for lunch if they get the chance, and Turkey knows that as well as anyone else. So they will definitely be joining us in a larger war if there is one to happen in that area as the NATO alliance, because Turkey really doesn't have much of a choice, at least when it comes to the whole geopolitical situation in the area. And also considering that they have a much greater chance at building their mini sphere within a sphere through NATO than they would with a Russian competitive sphere within the area, they're going to be generally against the Russian Federation in any aggressive actions they take against Turkey or the greater NATO alliance. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also a big shout out to Rain, who put in a $20 support as well. And thank you very much, Rain, for helping to keep us on the air as well. And I was just double checking here to make sure there was no comment attached to that. I don't think there was, and there's not. But thank you very much, Rain, for that. And we do appreciate it. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Rain. You didn't throw in a comment, but we are massively appreciative of it. It helps us to keep this thing running, helps it to make it possible. And where would we be if it wasn't for folks like you? Well, we all know the answer. We would be nowhere. We would be under a bridge, eating lentils and begging for anything, spare change. And that would be an incredibly
You'd be under a
unfortunate.
bridge eating lentils.
Yes, lentils, Matthew.
Damn.
It would be a tough life. It would be a tough life. Goodbye to all those sweet muffins. You wouldn't have those. Not under a bridge, you wouldn't. Not under a bridge, damn it. You'd be eating cardboard and fighting the local, the tweakers for like the copper wiring, so that way you can sell it to a scrapyard to get a little bit of money to buy a soda here and there every month or so. It would be a tough life, a tough one. You have to battle it out with the street rats. At this point, I actually sound like the last president. Or you'd have to battle it out with the street rats. The tweakers and the copper wiring and the ACs. Protect the AC like ACDC, Thunderstruck. One time I was in Scranton. And there was a homeless guy, and he got thunderstruck. A lightning bolt hit him. But beyond that, I gotta say, a big thanks to you so much once again for support. What?
I was just laughing at something somebody said in the chat earlier. I don't know if I can repeat it. I think I'm going to anyway, though. He said, "Look, Jack was just passing through scrotum. just passing through. That's all."
Look, Jack. I was driving down the road. I drove through scrotum. What about it? Folks, I gotta tell you something. I gotta come clean with y'all here. I saw a clip that was made by that new AI that's going all over the place. What is it, Matthew? SOAR or something like that?
SOAR 2.
Yeah, that's what it is. So, I saw a clip, folks, and it was of Ronald Reagan. And he was standing there at the podium, and he sat there and said, "Well, yeah, I sold crack to the inner city, so what? Shut the hell up." And he just walked, and it sounded just like him, and I died laughing. I cannot get that out of my head now. I've been thinking about that on a loop for the whole past day since I saw that, because it sounded just like him, and it had the emotion and everything. And I gotta be honest with y'all, I don't really understand why the craze about AI is a big deal. To be entirely honest with y'all, because one, it's either taking jobs or it's just completely useless, and it only serves an entertainment purpose. But I'm not gonna lie, that was funny as hell. I was dying laughing at that. And also there's another one. There's like a whole series at this point. I don't know if you've seen it, Matthew, but it's Reagan in the back rooms. Like he's in the back rooms, like the liminal space deal, and he's wandering around in it.
Yeah, I've seen that one. I've definitely seen that one. I've seen a lot of those with the politicians of old times in there. Honestly, though, like if y'all notice, like I'm not sure if this is just me or not, but the electrical cost of electricity is going through the roof. I'm beginning to wonder if it's the AI data centers that are being built drawing on the power grid so much that the electrical companies are raising the price of their power, because it seems like it's going exponentially through the roof, like the cost of electricity, and it's not going down. And it seems to coincide with the popularity of AI. So I'm not sure if I'm pinning the wrong thing on them there with that, but it seems a little bit odd that the electricity is going up around the same time that's going off.
Well, Nancy, gotta be honest with you. Yeah, I did sell electricity to those AI companies. So what? Shut the hell up. But beyond that, man, I honestly, that probably would be the reason, though. I mean, they're having to reopen all the reactors at 3 Mile Island to try and provide electricity to one data center. I mean, that gives us a pretty good idea. These things are drawing a lot from the grid.
Yeah, it seems like it, and also it's like for what? It's like what productive use are irregular people getting out of it, other than simply making a cute video or something here and there, like with a dog driving a car or something. It's like what are we really getting out of it? One thing that we're not getting out of it is apparently economic savings, because if it's true, and it turns out that the AI data center is pulling more power from the grid, it's causing our electrical bills to go up. The economy is already kind of in a rough spot. If people don't realize that, it's kind of a little rough right now. So that's only putting more strain on people. For what, really? It's like, what are we even getting out of it?
Yeah, it's like we are massively growing this AI base of a sort, like an industrial base, and we're not even improving the electrical infrastructure with it. You know, it's like how in the world does that
Well,
make
I mean,
sense?
yeah, I mean, even if you turn on the nuclear centers, I think I can't remember for certain, but I think one of these nuclear plants that are being reactivated, like an old one that was in foul shape, and they're reactivating it and renovating it and everything. I think all the power from it is going to be literally directed straight to the AI data center for one of these companies out there. So it's crazy how much power consumption these places use, and it's like it's like who's funding this stuff? Is it being and obviously we're hearing the government like doing a $500 billion plan to expand AI power and things like that. It's like what is the U.S. citizen getting out of that to warrant spending $500 billion on something like that? I'm not really sure what we're even getting out of it.
I don't know. But something is actually crazy. You know something? It's crazy, Matthew. It's crazy. We're kind of going through the same thing now that people went through in the 1920s. Because back in the day, like in Dearborn, Michigan, at the Ford plant at Dearborn. Let me show you this. This is crazy. This is crazy. All right. Ford plant at Dearborn. Back when it opened. Let me see if I can get a picture of that. Let's see here. Oh yeah, here's a picture of it. Let's see here. Nah, that's not a good enough picture. We need a better picture. We need a better picture. Why the hell's the better picture? Let me just pull it up. I'll pull it up directly. Old power plant. Back in the day when these massive automotive factories opened up in Detroit, they were so large that they would have their own power plants. And this right here is actually the abandoned power plant that literally was built with the whole purpose of producing electricity just for the Dearborn plant for Ford.
Well, that's okay though. I mean, they were building their own infrastructure, and also on top of that, they were producing something that benefited the people. They were producing vehicles that people wanted to buy. So you actually got like a tangible result out of that. With AI, I'm like, yeah, it can give you some advice here and there, but it's like most people use it as a supplement. They don't use it to replace like professional advice. At least I hope they're not. So it just doesn't seem like the same thing.
I mean, kind of, yeah, that's true. But it is a little bit interesting to see. They kind of did the same thing back then. But at the same time, folks, you know what's a little bit scary? Is that they stated that for the annual report so far, it looks like the U.S. GDP has only grown 0.1% this year, and the rest of it's AI. Like, the rest of all of the GDP growth from this whole year is AI based. And the rest of all of the other economic sectors combined have only grown 0.1%.
Yeah, that's disturbing if that's true. I heard something similar to that, and I was thinking, surely that's not most of our GDP growth is AI, because AI to me seems like a bubble, like an economic bubble to a certain degree. It's kind of like the same hype that was around the dot-com bubble to a large extent, and it turns out that that obviously came crashing down after the dot-com bubble bursted. It came crashing down. So I'm hoping the AI bubble stays good. As much as I think AI is kind of pointless right now, for many reasons. Now, from a defense and government perspective, I could see why the government would want it. I'm just not sure why the people would want AI. It doesn't really benefit people; it just benefits government.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to personally agree. I would have to say, and also, I see some people bringing up some interesting topics out there in the chat. So it's government spending money to reduce jobs. Yeah, that's generally how it's going these days. It was a little bit wild with that. And I'd also have to say that this whole deal of going around and like taking 10%, like 10% to the big man deal with all the companies, um, that is like, I just got to be honest with you all at this point. This isn't even political. This is just literally fact. That's pretty socialist. Like going around and getting 10% of most major industrial concerns in the country, and it's controlled by the government. I mean, usually in some sort of an economic emergency, the government will take control of something for a temporary period. But just going around and doing that is kind of like just a course of business for the government. That is pretty socialist. Like if you looked at
Well,
Britain in the 1950s, that's what Clement Attlee did.
Well, I will say this. I did some research into that. It appears like it on its face, but here's what it really is. And once again, I'm not saying it's justified or anything like that. I'm simply explaining the rationale behind it. Typically, and the enforcer is right. Typically, when the government does something like this, it's usually because of a bailout or something like that. Like, for example, during the 2008 crisis, there was a bunch of bailing out the government was doing. And what they would do is they would make what's called strategic investments in private companies. They would go in and get a percentage of the company. They'd give them cash infusions, and that would keep the company afloat. So usually that's during economic crises. That's when that happens like that. But right now, we're not really in an economic crisis right this very second. But I think we might be heading toward an economic crisis. I think the government's trying to preemptively take care of that. So, I don't know. Like, I'm a little bit on the fence about it because some people say it's seizing the means of production, which is generally a communist ideology, but it's really not doing that because the 10% is not necessarily a controlling stake in these companies. It's an influential stake, but it's not necessarily a controlling stake. It depends on how the shares are divvied up and things like that in these companies. So I don't know. Like, it seems like maybe they're prepping for a financial collapse in the United States, which I would say the warning signs look like they might be there for a potential economic collapse. I'm not an expert, but it looks like we're in a bit of a crisis right now. We're heading toward one. But I don't know. Like, I don't think it's as severe or as bad as people are making it out to be.
I would say maybe not, but the idea of free market enterprise hardly existing because of existence of monopolies in every sphere that'll crush you before you can even make it anywhere. And also then on top of that, the fact that the government's just taking 10% for the big man on most of these major companies. What this feels like, folks, to me, and I'm not saying that this is fact, this is just more so feeling. One of the few times I'll share a feeling more so than a fact with y'all. It feels a lot like what Britain did in the 50s when Winston Churchill lost a snap election and Clement Attlee, who was a Labour Prime Minister, came into power, and then he nationalized all major industries in the United Kingdom and had them nationally controlled by the government. Which, whether you like that or not, I mean, it didn't do that badly. Like, just speaking about it honestly, it didn't do too badly because Margaret Thatcher only redid it in the very late 80s. So it stayed around for about 40 years and kind of did okay during that period. But at the same time, though, it feels quite socialist. Like beyond the fact that it may or may not be, and also we've done stuff like this before, like nationalizing the railroads for a short while. It just isn't something that is a good idea, like at least to me. Unless if something is
Well, if it
happening,
was
like a complete economic collapse, then it's fine. But doing it preemptively, it doesn't really seem like a good idea.
Well, if you're thinking, here was my theory. When I saw the government doing the 10% thing with Intel and doing the 10% thing with the metals company, I was thinking, is the United States trying to move toward like a China hybrid economic model? Because it seems almost like what China does to their companies that they have in their government or in their country. That seems like what they do to it. But the difference is, though, like I said before, it's not a controlling stake in the company. So the U.S. government can have a 10% stake in a private company, and it's not controlling. But in China, though, what they do is something called the golden share. It's a type of stock that basically lets the government of China control and outvote all the other shareholders in that company, where they get the veto power over everything that company can do. So, for example, if the Communist Party doesn't like something that a Chinese company is doing, they can exercise their golden share and simply say, we outvote all of you. We don't care what you're saying. You will do what we say or else. But it's not the same thing with the United States yet. It's not quite there, but it seems like it's inching toward it. Like it's getting close, very close to being similar to it, but not quite the same thing just yet.
It's getting there, though. And I also saw someone say in the chat, and this is one I have to take personal grievance with. Nothing big, but someone said nationalizing healthcare works in the UK. I mean, kinda not really. Like, I'm not wanting to be political on that, but it works in the UK. But at the same time, the appointment rates, like the appointment, I guess you could say, scheduling advance that you have to make is quite significant, and that's usually a large gripe in the United Kingdom. Yes, you will get healthcare, but you could break an arm, and I've heard that some people have to wait about 2 weeks. By then, an arm's almost set. However it was broken to be able to get an appointment. But at the same time, though, I'll also say that the semi-privatized form of healthcare we have in this country right now also does not work either. So it's a bit of an issue with that, because some people say that a completely privatized healthcare system works. And it did for most people. But the problem is, folks, like, to explain what the issue was and why there was even a debate on that back in the day when the Affordable Health Care Act was passed, the debate is that some people are uninsurable because they have such high health issues or such large health issues, every insurance company labels them a significant insurance risk. And so they won't insure them. So those people just couldn't get insurance. That was why people had an issue with that back in the day. And for that reason, people said the system was broken because a small amount of people who had serious medical ailments could not ever get insured. On the other hand, though, when you fully nationalize a healthcare system like the British, then you start running into state mismanagement. And then that's a huge issue because with the United Kingdom, there is generally a lack of healthcare workers that exist inside the country. And for that reason, there's a huge amount of people who need the medical services, but a small amount of people who can provide them, which leads you to those long waiting queues. And the British government they try a little bit to try and alleviate that situation, but they cannot do enough. Because generally of just the innate form of a government to mismanage something like that. I would say the best way that you could try and come up with a solution to that is coming up with it's just tough. It's just tough, folks. Like, there really is no good way to answer that one at this point. It would take like a load. Like, it would take me sitting down for hours and trying to think that one out to even come up with something that would sound somewhat reasonable. But that is a really sort of a sticky topic to get into, like coming up with an answer that works for everyone.
I think honestly, like a good start, like I'm not sure now overhauling the whole system, that's a nightmare. Like it needs to be done, but that requires a lot of thought. Like you can't just say one day I'm going to overhaul the whole thing and just, be done with it. It doesn't work like that. You got to sit down, think it over. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work to actually overhaul it. But at the same time, though, a huge problem people have today is they find insurance companies are not covering claims that are legitimate claims, and they find any reason possible to deny your claim, regardless of if it should be covered or not. If there was more regulations in the short term to prevent insurance companies from denying claims wrongfully and basically make it a lot harder and more regulated for those companies to deny real claims, that would sort of give like a patchwork in the short term to fix things temporarily. At least in the short term, it would.
I would say it probably would. That I would be honest with y'all. The healthcare system would have to be changed in incremental steps. In any way that it's done, it would have to be done over probably a decade with multiple different acts passed through Congress to try and fix it. And then you also have the whole issue of the special interest groups pretty much stymieing it. There will be a Congress member that will not go along with anything. No compromises. They'll just snowball the deal, much like anything in any democratic institution. But that will also be an issue. Not to say that democracy is an issue, but at the same time, that'll also end up becoming an evident problem. And then people, get confused about why there's a holdup, and then they'll get pissed off at different people or that guy or something, and then it becomes a whole nasty ordeal. But I would have to say, folks, I think this is also something a lot of people can agree on. The healthcare system, especially in this country, needs to move from what it is right now. But it doesn't matter what direction. I think everyone can just agree it needs to change from what it is at the moment. Because while it was a noble idea in theory, it was poorly implemented, and still a lot of people, everyone in the country, is having to deal with that to this day. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that, well, at least my opinion. But with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, so our next one goes to Danny B once again, and he puts in another $50 support. And thank you very much, good sir Danny B, for that support once again. And he said, Chef Danny again, and tomorrow is my daughter Brooklyn's birthday tomorrow. And also, happy early birthday to your daughter, by the way. He said, she's going to be 11, and here is to the Moving Fund, LLTLSA, and take one from the chat.
Hey, and I gotta thank you for support, Danny B. And I gotta thank you for the kind words. And I also gotta congratulate your daughter Brooklyn on being 11 years old tomorrow. I gotta say, a big thanks to you so much for being the chef of the LSA. I hope you have a fun birthday with your daughter tomorrow. I hope that it's an amazingly fun one and that there's many laughs and stories to be shared, of course. But I gotta say, a humongous thanks to you so much once again for the support. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. And we will make sure to take one from the chat in your honor. So, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the one from the chat goes to Robert Johnson. And Robert said, anything on China's Xi Jinping having a stroke today? I'm not sure who reported that, Robert, because I've heard a lot of people saying that in the live chat. I've seen no credible evidence, at least on my end, that Xi has had a stroke at all. I think those same rumors went around, I think 6 or 7 months ago, and it turned out it was a nothing burger. So, not sure where that came from. I personally haven't seen anything on it, so I can't verify that at all. But Enforcer, what say you?
I haven't been able to verify that either. There's actually been a lot of rumors circling around in China. We already know the Central Military Committee issues that exist between the tensions of the PLA and the Chinese Communist Party, which is a prevailing issue pretty much on the day-to-day. But some people have been throwing around rumors that he's getting ousted and he's trying to run into hiding. Others have said he's had a stroke. I think that there's just a lot of sensationalism going on around that at the moment because I haven't been able to verify or confirm any of the stories that have been coming out recently. We'll make sure to report on it if we can, but at the moment, it doesn't appear that any of these stories seem to have a lot of credence to them. But I do thank you for support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are about to move on to the next one. But I saw someone say, let's see. Someone said, it's all about the corn. It's the corn leading people to be obese. I would have to say the dietary implementation, everyone, something that's wild is that everyone knows now, and this is something I believe has been proven to be true, that the food pyramid is not the ideal diet. I think that was actually stated by the FDA, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a whole deal that happened. It has an interesting history behind it. It started with Eisenhower having a heart attack, and they had to come up with something because he was a smoker. Eisenhower was, and he had a heart attack because of smoking. And so the doctors who gathered around, they had to come up with an answer as to why he had a heart attack. And so they were like, could it be smoking? And they're like, oh, hell no. Like, that would not be acceptable. And so they were like, you know what? It's red meat. He has too much red meat to eat. So they revamped the dietary table for the larger part from the older Victorian era model, which was a little bit of everything. So you're supposed to have an equal portion of everything, equal portion of meat, equal portion of grain, fruits, vegetables, and so on. They revamped it to where it was a pyramid-based system. And the largest amount of any sort of a product that you were supposed to consume are grains. And it really doesn't matter whether it's corn or wheat grains, or even rice for that matter. Grains are just not really good to eat in incredibly large portions. They are quite healthy for you to eat in smaller amounts, but they are the number one trending leading cause for obesity, at least from what a lot of dietitians have started to research. And so they have started to say that they're most likely moving back towards a Victorian era dietary model, which is a little bit of everything, instead of having a whole bunch of grains and then having less and less of each item working up the pyramid until you get to meats, which is the smallest amount you're supposed to consume according to the food pyramid structure. So a little bit interesting with that. I'll be honest with y'all, I don't follow any dietary model. I just eat whatever's available and whatever is the cheapest. But I would say that eating a little bit of, I will be honest with y'all, that sounds like common sense though, that just eating a little bit of everything and not too much of any particular item would probably be the healthiest way to eat. That's just what I would think by default would make the most sense, because we are omnivores. We're one of the few creatures on the planet that are successful omnivores. And for that purpose, you would think that eating a little bit of everything would be the healthiest way to go instead of eating a whole bunch of grains and then less and less of each other specialized item. But also another thing about that, though, is that also has a lot of a social sort of a impact to it as well. Because think about it, folks. What are the cheapest things out there to get to eat? It's grain-based, or it is some sort of a potato-based or a tuber-based sort of a food source. You can always get a side of fries, or you can always get some sort of a piece of bread or something like that somewhere. They're the cheapest things to eat. So if you build a food pyramid dietary structure, it isn't about what's the healthiest thing to eat. It's probably about what's the most affordable or available item to eat, and therefore that one's the one that takes priority. That also is another way you could look at it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Wind and Raven Steve Patterson. And thank you very much, Steve, for that $20 support. He said, I've been listening in every day for quite a while now, and great job. Keep up the coverage, and the show prep must be nuts.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's nuts. It's crazy. Because not only do we have to put down the news, Matthew amalgamates the news along with me through the day. We repost stuff. He's the one who generally runs the Twitter, but every once in a while they get on there and repost some stuff. But when it comes to the night, I have to go and repost everything from the map, put it on here from both of our repostings through the day, and then think it through in a storyboard form. And I have about, usually on most nights, about 2 hours actually more so like 2.5, because I kind of started a little bit beforehand. But at 7 o'clock local time, or 7:15 local time to be more specific, that's when the real prep starts on the actual physical side of the show. But before then, I'm sitting around looking on my phone through the stories, trying to figure out which ones are going to be kept, which ones are going to be thrown out, how to put them all together. So it's an insane sort of a turnaround time, especially on these shows on my end. And then on Matthew's end, he's making polls. He's doing his title and stuff for the live chat and all. And he's also trying to prep to be ready for the night and also work on the polls primarily. So it's a pretty crazy sort of a turnaround on a day-to-day basis and a very short amount of time to do it. So I got to thank you so much for the support and enjoying it, because you help us to be able to keep this sort of insane schedule and turnaround going to be able to do this thing every day. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Steve T. And Steve puts in a 20. And a huge shout out to you, Steve, for that support as well. He said, serious thought on EW, electronic warfare and munitions. Would a small, cheap fiber drone be able to fly into an EW affected area with a transmitter or target, then be able to guide for larger standoff munitions to improve accuracy?
From what we generally understand, the answer to that would be yes. It seems like most fiber optic drones are not susceptible to electronic warfare interference, and so the basic answer to that is that, yeah, that would most likely generally work. So I hope that does address that well, and a big thanks to you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Gerald Everett, who puts in a 20. And Gerald said, did you ever consider using a small cargo plane like the FedEx service to do a one and done to SLC? Honestly, Gerald, I personally don't like using the mover services. I've heard horror stories about stuff like that. Not necessarily FedEx. I'm not talking about them. I'm just talking about mover services in general. I don't know. Like, it seems like sometimes it gets delayed, and we can't have any delays. Like, we got to be there quick, get set up quick, and be ready to go. Because we're trying to minimize our off-air time as much as possible, and we hope to only be off the air for maybe 5, maybe 6 days pushing it. So we're trying to minimize that as much as possible. So I don't want to put my stuff in the hands of someone I'm not sure if they're going to show up or not. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's an interesting idea. I would have to agree with Enforcer Matt on that, though. I would like to make sure that I'm in physical contact with my stuff while it's making its way out there, because only yourself will actually pertain any real value to your physical items, while others may not. So while, it would be a little bit easier, I think we are pretty much set in what we have to do moving out there to Salt Lake City, which is a really cool place. And I can't wait to get out there, folks. I've heard so much cool things about it. There's great places out there like Gobbler's Knob and Twin Peaks, and Box Elder Peak, and all kinds of cool places like that. You got to go out there. You got to see them all. But beyond that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Crispy, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Crispy, for that $20 support. And he said, my condolences.
And I would have to agree. Our condolences go out to LSA Sergeant Figman and his family as well. So big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are moving on to the next one.
And we have a $14 support from Exotic Parallel. And a huge shout to you, good sir, as well for that support. He said Russia doesn't have the money to maintain their nukes, plus half of them probably won't even launch. And I meant they were driving donkeys and golf carts into combat. And how many could they shoot down, meaning the EU and the US?
That's a good question. And I thank you for clarifying. I would say that we could shoot down a decent amount of them, but certainly not anywhere close to a large amount of them. The Russian Federation, even if they only have half of their nuclear weapons operational, they would still have about 3,000 operational nuclear weapons. Our ground-based missile defense system, the GMD, is only capable of intercepting most likely 30 ICBMs. And that is before the MIRVs separate and create individual warheads. So with that in mind, it would be a very limited number. Generally, we are still working off of the mutually assured destruction doctrine in the present day, along with the Russian Federation understanding that that would be what would also happen to them. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, and a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Robert Krogan, and Robert puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Robert. He said, welcome back, welcome back.
Hey, and thank you so much for the welcome back. We love to be back. We love to be back. And I thank you incredibly for the support and helping this channel to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be back. We wouldn't be able to be breathing in that fresh air. And so a huge thanks once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we got a $10 support from none other than Dan Brooks. And Dan said the Russians destroyed a hummus factory today. It could be the only way they know how to say chick please.
Ah, man, I see what you did there. Chickpeas, hummus. That's a good one, actually. Like, that was actually a pretty good dad joke. I gotta say, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to hit great jokes like that. And honestly, I'm a sucker for dad jokes. I think they're hilarious, actually. Like, that wasn't an overreaction. I really do think that they're great. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Rye Guy SR. And Rye Guy said, it's glad to see you guys tonight. And take one from the chat. And LLT LSA, Slav Ukraine.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Right Guy SR. And we will make sure to take one from the chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
Also, by the way, is that you sniffing into the microphone? I keep hearing like sniffing like every 2 seconds whenever I start talking.
No, that's not me. Like I'm completely silent over here. I'm not even sniffing. I'm like mouth breathing right now, actually.
I'm hearing like anteater levels of sniffing whenever I start talking. I'm like, what the hell is that in the background? I hear like,
Hold up, let me unmute this. Jokes. I think they're hilarious, actually. Like, that wasn't an overreaction. I really do think that they're great. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Rye Guy SR. And Rye Guy said, it's glad to see you guys tonight. And take one for...
I don't hear it. I don't hear it.
I tell you what, I'm hearing some sniffling. I'm hearing some sniffling. But anyways, jumping into that live chat question proper, this one goes to none other than Alex Talent. And Alex said, when do you think all the conflicts will be resolved and we can go back to some sense of normalcy?
It is the 41st millennium. I'm just kidding. Like, if you know the reference, you know. But beyond that, I would have to say, I don't think it's ever going to end. I don't think it is. Generally, now that our looking glass is looking over the whole world, the truth is nothing ever ends. When something looks like it's about to end, something else starts. Usually that's how it's always been in history. Nowadays, it's a lot more like that than ever. It's a pretty rough time historically. But I would have to say I don't really know. I don't really know if we're ever going to see a time where things calm down, at least for now. I think it might actually go on for decades like this without an end, before we see some sort of a semblance of peace or the absolute doom of humanity, which will bring a peace in and of itself. But with that, I hope that does address that the best.
Is it late stage globalism?
I wouldn't say it's late stage globalism. Like, I would actually say that this is the attempt at a multipolar sort of a world, which was a really stupid thing for a lot of people to be cheering on, because this is what it creates is increased instability, which is, I think, something that a lot of people really didn't understand when they talked about multipolar worlds, or anything like that back a couple of decades ago. Because when I was growing up, folks, in the early 2010s, the big buzzword was multipolar, as in there would be multiple different spheres of influence in the world, and how it was going to be great because there will be a balance to the United States and their imperialism, and there will be checks. And I always thought that was a goofy idea even as a kid, because I was like, why in the world would we want an enemy country to check us? Like, it's like, why would we ever want that? Turns out you wouldn't, because now we're living in it, and it's certainly not a good time to be around. Like, that's just the honest truth of it. But anyways.
Yeah, I don't like being checked. That checking business, I'm not a big fan of that whatsoever. But honestly, though, when they came up with nuclear weapons, that was supposed to be like the thing that settled it all. That was supposed to be the thing that kept world peace. But the problem is, the people that came up with mutually assured destruction and that whole doctrine of geopolitics, they didn't really factor in the fact that someone could come to power in one of these nuclear-armed countries that legitimately is mad in the head, and doesn't really have any restraint. They were assuming that everybody that had control of the nuclear weapons were going to be reasonable and rational. But that was a very bad assumption to make, because now we're finding out that someone like Vladimir Putin, who is obviously unhinged, could threaten the entire world with destruction because he wants to have territorial ambitions.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's kind of the truth of it. That's really the honest truth of it, to be entirely honest with you. But with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from My Trucking Travels. And he said, thank you for providing the geopolitical and war news that mainstream media, for whatever reason, ignores. And LLT-LSA.
And I got to thank you so much for enjoying it. It's folks like you that give a chance for us to have a breath of fresh air out here. And I got to thank you for having an open mind and listening to news that isn't political. I'm glad to know that a lot of non-political people gather here on this channel every day. to enjoy this news and to hear what's going on. I mean, it's scary news, sure, but a lot of people do enjoy it, and to that we thank you greatly. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, oh Matthew, I see why that guy's angry now. He's got a bone to pick with us about something we said about the United Kingdom. Apparently, do you see that? Do you see it?
I'm still waiting on his podcast, by the way, because he had some nasty words about the way we run ours.
Oh
So I
yeah,
said,
yeah,
"So
I
what's
saw
your
it.
podcast on YouTube?" I didn't see that. I didn't quite catch the name. I'm sorry. Which podcast is that?
Oh yeah, I saw it. I saw it earlier. Some about we stutter more than anything else. Like there's no news. It's just endless stuttering and looking at the screen. I was like, damn. I was like, that's pretty critical right there. I mean, what's this guy's YouTube? Like, which one's he running? Has he given a shot at it? You know, I'm just wondering. I'm curious. Where's your show? Where's your show? I'd like to watch it. I mean, you know, like you know, there's an old saying, an old poem from Teddy Roosevelt. It's about the fighter in the ring. You know, and it's about, you know, you don't judge a fighter for being in the ring whether he wins or loses. You're just proud of him because he's in there and in the fight. And from what I know, I don't think you're
Who said
running the
that?
show. That was Teddy Roosevelt.
Huh? Teddy had an interesting viewpoint. They still judge him anyway. They still judge him.
Man, Teddy Roosevelt was the first guy who came out and said everyone's a winner. Like he was the first guy.
Honestly, that's like this being somebody's in the. Honestly, that sounds like the excuse that current leadership might be using. Actually, don't mock them if they're in the ring. It's like, well, I mean, you can still be in the ring and still be judged for your performance. I mean, there's still like a performance review. I mean, even employers have that. What's the employees in the ring too? They don't get to get judged because they're in the ring.
I mean, we have actually a review, folks, and it's our like ratio. And so far, folks, no joke, our like ratio on pretty much every single stream has never dropped below 95%. Ever. I think the lowest it's ever gotten was 95.4%. Except for that one time, though, man, that we got brigaded, if you remember that one. And then that like ratio went down to 66%. That's the only outlier. But the other ones, our shows are always at 95 to 97%. And our videos are even higher. Usually our videos are at 98.5 to 99.2%. So, you know, whenever we get criticisms, I'm like, oh, well, you know, it's like, if that was bad enough, we wouldn't have a high like rate. Like, you know, it's like people would be disliking this thing if they didn't like it, and they don't. So, you know, I mean, you know, that's a tough one to sell. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bobby43 yet again, and a huge shout to you, Bobby, for the fourth super chat. And we appreciate that. And it's, of course, has Canadian support, by the way, all the way from Canada. And he said 5 to 6 days without the enforcer and no halfway house. I'm starting to get the shakes already.
Oh, dang, don't do it, Bobby. Hopefully we'll be back on air as quickly.
Man.
Oh man, dude, he doesn't even get the shakes from a lack of a show. It's a lack of snow. Oh man.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I'm not hanging in there. Oh man.
I'm
That was like a mixture of that current guy. Oh man, you got to remember to make sure you don't get the shakes. Okay, when you're trying to study for your exams, make sure you're taking nothing crazy. Okay, keep it light. Take the edge off.
I would have to say that you know, it's a little bit of an interesting thing thinking about people having withdrawals, but I wouldn't really worry about it too much. Because we shouldn't be off air that long. I don't think it's going to be that long. Matthew, how long is it going to be? Like factoring in everything, how long will it be?
We're hoping for just 5 days off the air, not counting Monday. So 5 days, 6 days pushing it.
Yeah, I think it won't be 6 days. I think it'll mostly be 5 or 4 at the most. We're trying to make it as minimal as possible, even to the point of pushing ourselves to exhaustion on the days we will be getting out to Salt Lake. So hopefully we'll be back on air as quickly as possible. And of course, everything's lining up to happen while we're gone. Y'all know what happens. Like, it's like whenever we're on the move, it's like the harbingers of doom, honestly. Like, that's what it feels like these days. Because whenever one of us travels somewhere, something bad happens in some place for some reason. I have no clue why. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're about to be moving on to the next one. And also, Matthew, Michael S. Oh, he whipped out the credentials. He's an OIF vet. I don't know how in the world that applies to running a show. Like, I really don't know how that's working there. But okay. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And our next one here is going to go to none other. Also, by the way, like, here's what, also, by the way, what does that stand for, by the way? I'm ignorant of this. What does that stand for?
Oh, I don't even know, actually. like, I have no clue. Like, I just said, I was like, oh.
Let's see. Let's see here. Okay, he's a military veteran. He's using all these acronyms and stuff. He's just a veteran. So okay, but here's the thing. Like I don't understand what this guy's problem. He said I've been here since day one. I find that hard to believe, sir, because if you've been here since day one, you'll know our style. So I'm not sure why all of a sudden it would be an issue on day 1,300 and something if you've been here since day one. So I have some doubts about that. I'm not saying it's a lie, but I'm also not saying it's necessarily, truthing either. Might be somewhere in between, maybe somewhere in the twilight zone, maybe,
I just
perhaps. I'm not really sure.
I just have to say here. I got to make this a little bit clear. I respect the veterans for their service to this country, but at the same time, being a veteran is not waving a blank check. I'm sure if you've been around since day one, you've probably heard the speech 1,000 times. You can still be a veteran and also be an asshole. Like I don't know if you know that. So I just want to put that out there to you. Like not trying to ruffle any feathers or anything. I respect your service, but you can still be an asshole and lose my respect pretty quickly, veteran or not. Just want to put that out there to you. Like that's a truth. But beyond that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to none other than Samuel Sizamonski, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Samuel, for that $50 support. And we do appreciate that. He said, hey, enforcers, next year I'm taking a road trip and going through Alabama. Oh, good luck. He said, is there anything that's a must-see, or is it a wave at the Capitol and get out kind of state? And I'm attempting to see all the capitals and keep up the good work, and long live the LSA. Well, lucky for you, Samuel, I'm a lifelong Alabama veteran, and so is the enforcer. I've lived here my entire life and was born here. I was born in the capital of Alabama, in Montgomery. That's where I was actually born. So I've seen the city go from being decent to being an absolute hellhole in Montgomery. Montgomery is dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. The capital area is somewhat safe. There's that main street where the Capitol's at. It's generally well kept and safe, and there's a lot of police presence. But if you go into the other parts of downtown, it gets unsafe, in my personal opinion. And if you go out further than that, it gets even more unsafe. I can't say exactly where I worked or where I used to go around and live and things like that. I want to get into all of that, but I lived in multiple different areas in Montgomery. I also worked there as well, and witnessed a lot of bad things all the time, constantly. Gas station robberies, stabbings at the gas station, shootings. You'd hear rifle fire out in the distance. I mean, it's very dangerous. I'm not exaggerating that. Like, it's legit dangerous. Like, I would literally not get gas in Montgomery because it was that dangerous. I'd go outside to a place where we lived outside in the suburbs, which is kind of country suburbs, kind of like the backwoods suburbs. But I'd go outside of it to go get gas because it was that bad. I almost got carjacked once too when I ran out of gas as well. So also, let me get rid of this idiot in the chat, by the way. This guy right here. He's getting racist.
By the way, man, he also tried to insinuate some sort of a threat because he brought up that one YouTuber that threatened to kill us a second ago, and then he said he remembers him. It's like, okay. It's like now you're affiliating with psychopaths. It's like real good look. Real good look. Because it's like, I think if I remember correctly, that guy was also a veteran. And he was also threatening us with bodily harm over an internet disagreement. So that's a little bit crazy. But beyond that, as you were saying, Matthew.
As I was saying, though, generally, though, here's what I would say. If you want to see the capital of Alabama, like, feel free to go downtown Montgomery and look at the Capitol building and stuff. There's a Supreme Court building down there. It looks good on the main street. I'm not going to, exaggerate. It does look nice on that main street where they keep it up nice. But outside of that, though, just take your picture, get out there in that one spot in front of the Capitol, and then head right out. Like, it's really nothing else to see there, and you're not missing anything. Living there was not that great either. And if you see anybody that's stationed there at one of the Air Force bases in Montgomery, they'll tell you the same thing. They'll say generally it's considered not a great station to be at. Hey, there's nothing to do around the base. There's nothing to do outside the base or anywhere. Nobody really likes it. So Huntsville is the only place in Alabama that I would say, like, there's things to see in Huntsville. It's based around the space industry. For example, the NASA Space Museum is there. There's something to see with that. I would recommend that. Mobile has some things, but nothing. Honestly, I'll be honest with you. Huntsville's probably the main place I would recommend, and that would probably be about it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say there are actually some pretty interesting things to look at in Alabama. Now, I diss on, like Matthew, we diss on the state a bit because, we grew up here, and you end up getting an archetype of pretty much every single type of person who's here. And I would say there's maybe like 4 different types, and 3 of them aren't good, and 1 of them's good, and those are the people we have who are friends here. But beyond that, Montgomery is a really dangerous city. Best to avoid most of it. If you were to come here, I would say that the best move you could make is to get off Interstate 85, drive down this little highway right here, South Union Street, right to the Capitol building, park right here, go over to the first White House of the Confederacy. It's a historic site. Then you can go to the state Capitol building, look around in the Capitol building. It's a pretty nice one. It's actually pretty neat. And then maybe go to the Alabama Department of Archives. That's about all there is really to do in Montgomery. Then it's best to scoot and drive right back down that road and get right back on the interstate and go somewhere else in Alabama. Montgomery is just really dangerous. A lot of shootings happen down there. Crazily enough, there was a really big one that happened recently right in downtown Montgomery in the middle of a fair, to case in point. And so I wouldn't really recommend hanging out there for long. There are some cool places, however, to go around here in Alabama. Like, for one, we do have the Tannehill State Park out here, which is an ironworks park of some of Alabama's first iron foundries. That's a pretty cool spot. There also is, let's see here, what else to show? Oh yeah, we have the Sloss Furnace in downtown Birmingham. It's the only pig iron mill that's still standing inside the country. It's also a National Historic Site. It's really interesting. Of course, maintenance isn't really a great prerogative here. You know, it's too big of a facility to maintain with the funds they get, but it is really cool to see, and a big part of Alabama's emerging industrial history at the latter part of the 1800s and 1900s. There also is a really cool place that isn't really mentioned a lot here in Alabama, which is Guntersville. And Guntersville is actually pretty interesting because you can actually find something here that you wouldn't find in most places in the state. Mountains, and also a pretty big inland lake. It's created because of a dam from the TVA within this area, but what is really cool about Guntersville, if you come here, is that it actually is an operational port. And that's something Matthew probably doesn't know.
Whoa, it's an operational port?
It's an operational port, and look where it is in Alabama. It's literally up in the very northern part of the state, nowhere near to an ocean. It is a river port, and they bring out these giant barges, like these right here, pull them up over here. This is the port of Guntersville, and it's actually a working industrial port. So it kind of has that old town feel to it for that reason. It's an interesting place to drive through for that fact. And then Huntsville is also pretty neat too. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff to see there. A lot of Fed money runs through that city, so it's a much higher end one, especially in the downtown, than anything else you'd see in Alabama. But those are probably the coolest places to see. And also the Bankhead National Forest is a pretty cool spot to see as well, because this is the last piece of virgin forest here in Alabama. And if y'all don't know what a virgin forest is one that was never chopped down. And every single forest that you'll see in Alabama, it was replanted generally back in the 1920s and 30s, really the 1930s, as a part of FDR's work programs. Before that, the whole state had been deforested. Bankhead is the only piece of forest left from the era of the settlers, pretty much, and also the pre-colonial era, that is still intact in the state of Alabama and in most of the southeast. So if you want to see what Alabama kind of looked like before all that happened, although you still really can't because there was the hickory extinction that happened in the 60s, but you can still go to Bankhead and kind of see what it used to look like. So I hope that does. Also, by the way, if you go to Mobile, one last shout out, you can see the USS Alabama, which is a pretty interesting sort of a battleship in itself. It's a pocket battleship. It's like an Iowa-class battleship, but a little bit shorter. And I also think a little bit slower. But anyways, with that, I hope that was a couple of cool things that you can see in Alabama, because while I diss on the state, I do think that Alabama is a pretty neat place. It's just that the people here sometimes can be a little bit too rough around the edges to handle on a day-to-day basis. But anyways, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to West of Star Army, who puts in a 10, and he said NATO should deploy troops to Estonia immediately. It's the most likely target for Russia to invade for many reasons, and there's not enough time to respond if and when they do.
And I would have to say I would generally agree with you. I think that that should be extended to the entirety of the Baltics. And a huge force should be pretty much permanently based around the Suwalki Gap. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Nap, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that support. He said, I really think these earthquakes are actually underwater nuclear bombs. So many are the same magnitude.
Not really. Like, I don't really think so, because usually when a nuclear test is conducted, they hardly even get up to a 6 on the Richter scale. These are 8s and so on. These are huge, absolutely huge. And to cause that kind of tectonic disturbance for the entire tectonic plate to shift like that, to cause an earthquake in a centralized area within that area, it would take a massive amount of force, more so than any nuclear bomb that's ever been created, even more than the Tsar bomb. So I would highly doubt that they're nuclear explosions. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to OK State 42, puts in a 10, and he said, the USA is selling the newest AMRAAM-D model to Pakistan, and this is surprising to me, but probably being done to combat quickly rising Chinese influence of weapons to India and Afghanistan. And what are your thoughts?
It could be possible. We are trying to still court the Pakistanis. I think we might be returning back to the Pakistanis now that we see that there's no path with India, considering that Pakistan isn't a part of BRICS and most likely won't be for well on into the future. That definitely could be the case. So we'll have to see how it turns out, but I honestly think at this point the Pakistanis may have been bought and sold by the Chinese, and there's really no way to get them back. We kind of missed the opportunity to keep them around, in my opinion. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Sunny Horizon, who said, I just want to say thank you for the efforts that put into these videos.
And I gotta thank you so much for the support and enjoying the work that we put into these videos, because we put a huge amount of effort, and we're always proud to know that people really do enjoy it and spend their time here. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Nathan Ringerwall. And thank you very much, Nathan, for that 10. He said, at least springs will always be stronger than technical difficulties. LTLSA.
And long live the Lee Spring Army, and I would agree. 100%. 100%. And so a massive thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Bobo Vasquez, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Bobo, as well, for that support. He said, for Enforcer Matt, LSA, and Slava Ukraine. And thank you very much for the vote of confidence, good sir, Bobo Vasquez. I appreciate that. For the cult of Matt fun, they say. To keep it running, to keep it ticking along, to keep it yapping along, they say. The cult. It's just a joke, by the way. But anyways, thank you very much, Bobo, for that support. Seriously speaking, and we appreciate that. Also, a big shout out to my trucking travels, who put in a 10. He said, everyone said last night that the Russians hacked you. LMAO.
No, they didn't. It was actually something else. It wasn't Russians or a doxing sort of a deal. Funnily enough, luckily enough, since we've been in Enforcer HQ 2.0, none of those psychos that used to dox us have been able to figure out where we are. So very fortunately, we have avoided that. So I'm really happy about that, and hopefully they'll never figure out where we are at Enforcer HQ 3.0, because we still have crazy idiots like that Michael S. guy who in the chat who tried to bring up someone who threatened to kill us and then insinuate that they would do the same. And you know, it's actually kind of crazy, folks, because people just don't know this, but if you have any, that voice crack was a voice crack of the century right there. If you have, but anyways, if you have any notoriety on YouTube, there are these like stupid idiots out there who threaten to kill you all the time. It doesn't matter what you say or what you do, there will always be some of them. And people don't get that until some guy, you know, like unfortunately, like Charlie Kirk gets out there and gets shot because one of these crazy idiots follow through with their insane notions. But everyone on the internet who talks about anything has to deal with psychotic nuts like that all the time. It doesn't matter whether you're political or non-political like we are. Like that guy apparently just couldn't stand a stuttering or something at this point, so now he's going to insinuate the threat of death over a stutter. You know,
also,
like,
I didn't see that. I didn't see him say
oh,
that.
I
I'm not
did.
sure where you saw that.
I did. He brought up the name of the guy, like his actual name.
Yeah, but I don't think he was insinuating. I don't think he was insinuating that on his part. He was talking about somebody else.
Well, you know, when you bring up someone who's known in the channel's history for threatening to kill us, you know, that generally...
Yeah, we don't know. That's a leap to take that. Just to make it clear, by the way, I didn't see him say that, so I don't know. You know, that's a leap to say that.
I don't know, but generally when you bring up someone who's threatened to kill you, you generally would go to that thing because that's the thing you know him for. That's the thing the channel would know him for. But I don't know. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he did. I'm not sure, but I took it that way. And you always have to deal with people who like to float that around like it's just a trivial sort of a deal, or bring up people like that like it's trivial. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, just to make that perfectly clear, by the way, I didn't see him say that, just to make that perfectly clear. So just to make sure that's out there as clear as it can be. So I'm not sure how that came up. But anyways, our next one here goes to Not For One, Yet For All Ukraine, who puts in a $10 support. And thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that support. He said, my Special Forces airborne brother has cancer and isn't getting paid or provided his medication, aka chemo, due to the shutdown. And my other brother in the U.S. Coast Guard isn't getting paid either. And what the hell, an LTLSA.
And I got to thank you for the support, and that's incredibly unfortunate to hear. And of course, the political games that everyone's playing always take priority over the people, but it's always unfortunate to hear about that sort of a deal. But a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Slim Jim, who puts in a 5. And he said, no other streams I'm watching are lagging like this at all.
Luckily, that finally was fixed tonight, but a big thanks to you for the support. And I also would like to make it a little bit clear that that specific person that we were talking about didn't directly insinuate the threat of death, but generally, from what I was understanding, it sounded like there may be some sort of underlying note on that, but he didn't directly state that. So I'd like to make a quick retraction on that sort of a claim. But with that, I hope that is addressed the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Dean London, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Dean, for that support. He said, I remember the days of 50 and 60 hertz electrics with the good old radio transmission under 30 megahertz.
You know, we could possibly, but actually, funnily enough, getting a radio broadcasting license through the FCC, I think that actually is a little bit of a lengthy process, I believe. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Idio Orion, who puts in a 5. They said, could you also break down on the Israel-Hamas agreement that was signed today? And thanks a bunch.
Generally, what the Israel-Hamas agreement has said is that the conflict will stop, and I believe that the Israelis are going to release a large amount of Hamas prisoners, and in exchange, Hamas is going to release the last 20 hostages that they have, dead or alive. So that seems to be the general agreement. So I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping the channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Stefan Goodnison, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Stefan, as well. And we do appreciate that very much. And we also have a 10 from Jack Horicon. And Jack said, longtime watcher and listener, first-time donator, and y'all are doing amazing work, and keep up the great stuff.
And thank you so much for the support, Jack. And I got to say, thank you for enjoying our work. And we will make sure to keep it up. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from the Wolfman, who said, can we stop with the flip-flopping and throw the book at the vodka addicts already?
Generally, I would say yes, but everyone else is trying to get up to that point and get, I guess, heated up to get to there. So a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Jelly Martin 18, and thank you very much, Jelly Martin, as well for that 5. He said, "I was playing my Steam Deck when the dude firing his gun using a Steam Deck came up."
What a coincidence! And honestly, the versatility, it's crazy. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to David Hurray, who puts in the 5. He said, I suffer from a serious medical condition, and the LSA really helps me get through it. Much love from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Hey, and a big shout out to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I gotta say, we're more than happy to help folks get through whatever they're going through by telling them the news every night and keeping them company. And also, what's that clicking noise?
I don't hear anything.
Man, I was hearing like a clicking noise. It was like a crab, like clicking its claws. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 5. And he said, a few bucks for the LSA and the benevolent Klingon Empire. Also, what do you guys think about the ISV, the next Jeep replacement? Tech talk about it?
Yeah, maybe. Like we could probably do one of those here in the future, during a rabbit hole. But a big thanks to you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying this channel. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Murphy, who puts in a 5. He said, thank you for your compassion for Charlie, and keep up the good work.
And thank you so much for the support. And of course, we always have compassion for folks who get killed, unfortunately, here in the United States over those sorts of things. It's always a tragedy to see. And I wish some people out there would understand that kidding around about folks or even mentioning folks who do that sort of a deal or threaten that sort of a deal isn't really a great move to make. Generally bad connotations with that. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Octavian Timorsanu. And he said, for every person out there that's trolling, there are 1,000 of us who appreciate what you do. And you guys always deliver great takes and keep speaking the truth in LSA.
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel keep it running. Thank you for the kind words. Generally, we run into hardly any detractors, but the ones who do, they like to try and make themselves get noticed as much as they can. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 3 from Plazoth, and thank you very much, Plazoth, as well, for that support, and we do appreciate that. And we also have a 2 from Greg Stevens, and thank you very much, Greg, as well. He said, the only place to hear this news like this, and thank you.
And thank you so much for enjoying the channel, and thank you for enjoying the news. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from LSA Sergeant Figment, and he said, LSA, hit the like button, that's an order.
And hit the like button, folks. That is in order. And we have actually gotten up to 4.4 thousand likes tonight. Pretty crazy amount. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Keys Wizard, and Keys Wizard said, there's a lot more where that came from, and USA.
Hey, and thank you so much once again for support, and of course, USA, USA. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from It's Court, and he said, have you heard the rumors of a Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0?
I generally have not. Some people are trying to say that it'll happen again, but modern weaponry just doesn't really necessitate anything being put in Cuba. Hardly anything could really be put there at value that would really change the strategic situation, so I would highly doubt that a Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0 would ever re-emerge. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Sagery Bloodfang, and who said LSA.
And LSA, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Dunkle X, who said Coffee Fund, LSA, and take one from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support to the Coffee Fund, and we will make sure to take one from the chat, Dunkle X, in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to LSAF Flight Sergeant, who said, you guys think EU states will follow through with the anti-orc airspace denial?
I would hope so. I have high hopes. We'll just have to generally wait and see, but I would hope that they would. It's about time. So a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Pedal to the Metal 65, who did not leave a comment, but thank you very much, good sir, for that support. We also have a 2 from Dupper Bobby to Slavia, Ukraine. Also a 2 from Sundown that said LSA buds, and a 1 from Alex Edwards, who did not leave a comment. But thank you very much to all 4 of you for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank all 4 of y'all massively for the support and enjoying this channel, because you folks are all part of making this channel a reality and helping us to keep this thing running every single day. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best that we possibly can. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into the live chat segment. Due to us going overtime, literally right now, we will be getting the Morse code decoders 3 live chats and then rounding out this stream. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so the Morse code decoders tonight were Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Airbar Garbo, Heroya Fluffiness, Kush, Copiatex, and Sire. And they said the Morse code says Europe is actually getting really confident issuing orders. It's a nice change. LLT LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and I gotta congratulate the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps for continuing to get that Morse code message correct time and time again. It is truly an amazing and profound thing to know that so many of y'all have continued to get that Morse code message correct, and we love to know that y'all are continuing to tell the message to the entirety of the Lee Spring Army every single night. So a huge congrats to y'all once again, and with that, we are on to the next super chat from Dunkle X, which is a 2, and Dunkle said, in honor of descendants to John McCarter, and I gotta thank you so much for the support, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Shalmanzer, who said, what's the difference between an attack on a NATO country and an attack on NATO?
I would say that there really is no difference. It's pretty much the same thing. An attack on a NATO country is an attack on the entirety of the alliance for the large part, so it's really one and the same thing. So I hope that addresses that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Spicy Dorito, who said, has anyone released photos of the drones over Western Europe? And as far as I know, we have no physical evidence to say who these belong to until we down one. And what are your thoughts?
That's true, and considering that a whole bunch of Chinese nationals were arrested in Norway near to the city of Svolvær, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, it is plausible that some of these drones could also be Chinese, but of course they'd have to start downing them to try and prove where they came from at all, and at the moment they really haven't downed any of them. So I would have to say you've got a pretty good point there. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so who is lucky last person that threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is JNN, who said, would you guys agree that the only reason that Putin will not abandon the war is because those people will actually see these staggering losses and that will start an actual revolution?
I think it's not really about the losses necessarily. I think it's more so the fact that if the war ends, the economy is most likely going to collapse, and then everyone's going to realize how bad things really are for them. They don't really know that yet. It's bad, but it's not insanely bad. But if the war ends, it's going to be incredibly bad. So I hope that addresses that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, folks, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching this show tonight, and I hope that you all have enjoyed it incredibly well. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world, and also on top of that, we will hopefully be making a short war video in the day tomorrow. Well, hopefully we can. But nevertheless, a big thanks to all of y'all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all either in the short war video or on the stream tomorrow. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, Hurram Slava, long live the Leaf Spring Army, and we actually have one last super chat. It's a 10 from Silence. And Silence said, would it be possible for y'all to make a summary of the whole hot dog man situation? Not on Maine, because I'm going down a rabbit hole on it, but only getting their side. Want to know yours? Not really. Like that whole thing is a cesspit. Like, we don't really touch it too much. But I do thank you so much for the support. And with that, we will see you all tomorrow. And of course, long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again tonight. And a huge shout out to the 107,000 people that joined us by the very end of the stream. And we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern on our next Nightly War News stream and on the midday short war video as well if there is enough news to cover. But with that, folks, thank you all once again. It was great to have you all tonight. We appreciate every single one of you. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Hurram Slava, get some rest and good night.
Go to